Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Cabbage Head Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Was the Immortal Vigilante Amber? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. It was time. Mirai had finally sent One for All away to safety, and with each day that passed the embers grew dimmer. They could delay no longer. How did it ever come to this? Ichigo always thought Mirai would have longer to hone One for All before passing it on, but now? They had no time. Mirai's long illness would most likely claim him within the year, so this was their only chance to stop Kansei themselves. Gold eyes turned to look into pale blue as Ichigo asked, "And you're sure Yuko will be safe long enough if we fail?" One for All isn't that distinctive unless you count the transferal itself, and Nisen never knew I had any ties to Yuko. He should be safe for a time, hopefully long enough to hone it. Mirai replied. "I still say that was an uninspired name choice," said Ichigo, before narrowing his eyes and continuing, "Are you sure you will be able to do this? You are even still calling him Sin. If you have any doubts you shouldn't go yourself." Mirai straightened, only highlighting how frail the man was, not a spare piece of flesh on him, and turned from the building to look straight at Ichigo for the first time. "My brother is dead, and I call that man that only to remember him. I will do everything I can to stop my brother's memory being defiled by him any further." Mirai said with such finality that Ichigo dared not challenge him further on the point. "All right then, shall we?" said Aikiru, turning to nod to the steel door to the warehouse, where, unless their information was wrong, or worse, Kansei had found some sort of quirk that let him sense them, their biggest opponent on the road to acceptance for quirks would be. Mirai nodded, walking towards the door, Ichigo one pace behind him. When he reached the door, Mirai reared back a fist and struck it. It had always been a wonder to Ichigo, quirks or no, to see the emaciated man perform such feats of strength. At the first blow the steel of the door dented, at the second it collapsed inward with a bang. Beyond the door was a dark warehouse, full of shelves upon shelves of shadowed boxes. "After you," said Mirai, as Ichigo raised his hand, palm up, golden flames springing to life there to light the dim interior. They traveled in tense silence, walking quickly through the warehouse, Ichigo a pace ahead now, watching everything they could see in the flickering light. He was secretly fearful that their quarry had retrieved whatever he had come for and fled, or, yet another pessimistic thought, that he had come here simply to lure them into some sort of trap. In the center of the warehouse was an apparently empty space, devoid of shelves. As in Ichigo's opinion, foolhardy pair approached it, there was a rustling of cloth and from just outside the golden firelight, Kansei's voice sounded, "Otudo. I'm glad to see you again." A pause as Kansei seemed, presumably pretended, to just notice Ichigo. "Though I don't recall inviting you to this family reunion." In spite of all Ichigo's experience, fighting both quirked and unquirked criminals in the chaos as quirked numbers exploded, he froze at the pure malice in those words. Mirai did not, touching Ichigo's shoulder as he passed him into the open space. Shaking himself, Ichigo continued forward, saying, "Yeah, well, my friend is a bit frail these days. He needed someone to keep him safe in case of any accidents." Ichigo allowed the flame in his palm to expand, a larger flame like a gauntlet coming to cover both his forearms, carefully held so that the flames were an inch or so above the skin. The brighter light finally revealed him. His dark hair as unruly as ever, the freckles somewhat ruining his villainous demeanor. His eyes were currently narrowed in a glare, directed past Mirai, straight at Ichigo. "I think I can keep my own brother safe without help from the likes of you," spat Kansei. "Your safety is a cage, Nisen. I will not return to my cage, and I will put a stop to this," interrupted Mirai before Ichigo could respond. "Are you sure about this, Nisen? You could still join us, still do the right thing." He continued. At this Kansei laughed, a bitter, inhuman sound. "The right thing? With you? No, my way is right. You will see that one day, Otudo. I will make sure of it. But first, I think I will deal with our little gatecrasher, see if I can't stop him from doing any more to turn you against me." At this Kansei was suddenly between Mirai and Ichigo. "Sheet, when did he get a warp quirk?" thought Ishigo as he frantically raised his palm to launch a fireball at Kansei. Mirai turned, as in slow motion, to face Kansei as he began to launch the sword-like thorns produced by one of quirks at Ishigo, who reflexively shaped the forming fireball into a wall to defend from them. The thorns slowed in the viscous golden flame as they burned, most reduced to ash before they passed the wall, the remainder falling short of their mark. The wall blocked my view of him. He has a warp quirk, thought Ishigo in horror the instant before it happened. His back was pierced by something and Kansei's voice sounded from a couple of feet behind him. Normally I might take your quirk or simply remove you with one of mine, but I noticed, even when we first met, how you are so careful to keep your fire away from your arms, the tall man mused conversationally. I have no use for such a pitiful, self-destructive quirk, and I have been dying to test out one of my recent acquisitions. He finished before activating a quirk. Ishigo burned. His quirk activated out-of-control fire sprouting over every inch of his flame-resistant but not truly fireproof skin. For that instant he screamed as Mirai shouted, and desperately rushed to try to stop whatever Kansei's quirk had done, somehow. Then there was nothing left but the fire, the ash, and the only part of him that was fireproof, his hands. Those golden flames seemed to take on the form of wings, before they too were gone, and Mirai was left alone to face his brother. Naomasa was at his wit's end. After 12 years of calm, the most infamous vigilante in Japan had suddenly, at least it appeared, returned full force. It was just possible that this was a copycat, if it weren't for the fact that the new attacks matched the MO from before, the gap in activity down to the smallest details that the police had never publicized. Before his sudden disappearance, which the detectives on the case had taken to speculating was due to biting off more than he could chew with one criminal or another, the vigilante, codename Amber, was both a mystery and a headache to heroes and police alike, ranging from Kyushu to Hokkaido, and at least once that they knew of in Korea. No sightings, no information about height or build, no name, no idea if they were even a man or a woman. Criminals would just show up outside police stations in the night, seemingly at random, tied up, and with a business card reading simply, Amber, and then a short list of offenses pinned to their chests. Most of the attacks seemingly took place in the victims' homes, but even the most circumspect criminals seemingly couldn't keep Amber out, or even catch a glimpse of them on camera. The camera footage of the areas would invariably have been destroyed somehow. Criminals would claim, truthfully, that they hadn't seen whoever attacked them. That was until today. Naomasa had been called in specifically to interview the latest of the new wave to arrive outside a police station, in Mizudafu this time. The former head of an underground fighting ring, at least according to the Amber business card, Kendo Fugo, was a slight, twitchy man, not the sort people would normally associate with that sort of violent business, but then Naomasa had seen far less assuming criminals. As Naomasa entered the interrogation room, Fugo's head snapped up from where he was staring at his hands, cuffed to the table. Apologizes for making you wait like this. We have reason to believe your case is tied to a series of vigilante attacks, so as the detective in charge of that case I was called in. My name is Tsukachi Naomasa. Now, before we begin, I am required to inform you that my quirk, human lie detector, as the name implies, allows me to tell when you lie, said the detective, in a relatively pleasant voice, after turning on the room's recording device. The man nodded, unconsciously running his thumb along the burn mark on his forearm, one of the commonalities of Amber victims. Most of the detectives on the case thought they probably had a fire quirk. Why yeah, that's fine. So, to begin, continued the detective, can you state your name for the record? Kendo Fugo. Naomasa reached into the folder he had placed on the table between them and pulled out a picture of the Amber card. And do you recognize this? Why yeah, it was pinned to me when I woke up outside the station this morning. And do you remember what you were doing before you woke up there? Naomasa asked. As a formality, no one ever remembered Amber. Yeah. I was sitting in my office. When I turned to get something from the cabinet behind me, there was this kid dash. In spite of himself, the detective stiffened. Fugo must have noticed because he cut off. Kid? You mean you saw the person that attacked you? Naomasa asked. Yeah, like I said, I turned around and they were just there, in my office, no idea how they got there. replied Fugo, confused. That is unexpected. Did you get a good look at them? Notice any distinguishing features? Let's see. They were clearly surprised when I turned around, must not have expected it. Looked young, probably not more than 15? 150, maybe 155. Dark hair, dark eyes. Dressed all in black. He tapped the burn mark, threw a little fireball at me before I could see much more. A pause. Next thing I knew I was freezing, tied up outside before sunrise. Naomasa was frantically writing this down, while internally cursing. Too young. Copycat then most likely, but how? Schooling his voice to calm, Naomasa asked, so he threw a fireball at you and you passed out? That would be a very weird quirk. No, he threw the fireball, then rushed in. Stuck me with a needle full of something, then I passed out. So a simple fire quirk as a distraction, then chemicals to knock them out? Thought the detective as Fugo went on. That kid was quick, he must have known what he was doing, more experience than a kid that age should have. Naomasa didn't think the man had really meant to say that last out loud, quickly adding, I think. Ping. Would you be willing to describe the kid you saw to our sketch artist? Asked the detective after noting down the lie. Sure, said the man, seemingly remembering to stutter again. And does the term all for one mean anything to you? Asked the detective, pitching it as if an afterthought. Should it? Not really, don't worry about it. Now excuse me, we'll continue this after I call the sketch artist. Naomasa said, standing to leave the room. Copycat or no, the continuation of never going after anyone, or at least anyone important enough to know, that was tied to AFO was worrying. You didn't take down ringleaders while avoiding AFO's men by chance. Tashinori needed to be told about this, thought the plain-faced man, taking out his phone. 3 hours earlier. Izuku, as they were currently known, slipped back through the window as silently as he had entered it. That was a mess. What else could go wrong, Mom finding out? Grumbled the boy to himself as he removed the black wig, revealing green hair, curling wildly in every direction. It wasn't that bad, he barely got a glimpse, and you reacted much better than I did the first time a target turned unexpectedly. Came the answering voice in the boy's head, more a half-dozen voices talking in unison than a single voice really. You say that, but our last life managed to go their whole career completely anonymously. What if he saw something that would let them identify us? Asked the boy peevishly, hiding the wig in its place under the small bed. The worst he could do would be to mention your height. You don't look like yourself at all right now. And we stayed anonymous by pure luck half the time. So you keep saying, but I've got an additional generation's experience, I shouldn't be messing up this badly. The boy continued to argue with the voices in his head as he expertly crept through the house to the bathroom, perfectly avoiding any creaky floorboards, and opening the door in utter silence to avoid waking their mother. I really like this look, but not as much as that time we were blonde. Chimed the voice. Well, I like looking like myself, thank you very much. And you mean the time you got yourself killed by the time you were 20 you die? Sniped Izuku, beginning to remove the makeup that hid his distinctive freckles. Harsh. Groused the voice, one voice predominating for a moment. Don't say it as if I was being stupid, Kansei would have killed Aki if I had run. In fairness, we should have known that he would have kept that quirk after. Guys, please don't argue while we're awake, you know it gives me a headache. Cut in Izuku before the voice could begin one of its disagreements about centuries-old decisions. Fine. We'll be quiet. Should we take it you won't be dissuaded from training instead of dreaming tonight? Asked the voice, sounding more concordant, if somewhat resigned. Yep. Don't sound so weary, the more you teach me, the longer it will be before we have to teach someone new from scratch, replied Izuku cheerily, removing the colored contact lenses to reveal eyes of brilliant gold, before placing them in the special case he took from one of the dark outfit's pockets. The voice sighed. This is worse than Ishigo, maybe we shouldn't have taught him how to hide eye bags so young. It began grumbling, not for the first time, as Izuku sneaked from the bathroom, heading for his bed, and not quite sleep. Katsuki was said. Finji Deku was spacing out in English. At least he wasn't muttering to himself this time. Honestly, Deku had said Katsuki off nearly constantly since his quirk had come in, since the green eyes had suddenly turned gold in the playground one day. It wasn't just that he started spacing out a lot. From what Katsuki remembered, the nerd had always done that. It was because shitty Deku had started to constantly look down on Katsuki. He said they were still friends, and he still called him Kakin, which was another thing that set Katsuki off, but he refused to compete with him anymore, like he wasn't worth it. Flame Shape was the only quirk in the shitty school that was nearly as good as Katsuki's, and he just refused to use it, didn't even really play with it like the extras did. He even said he didn't want to be a hero. Bullshit. Who didn't want to be a hero? Not that anyone else in Katsuki's class had any hope of becoming a hero. It was effing stupid that the only other person Katsuki knew whose quirk was such a great combo, telekinesis from his mother and fire breath from his father, to make a sort of pyrokinesis, insisted on wasting it. It never stopped him from playing hero any chance he got, though. That was the only time Katsuki had ever seen him use it, when Deku decided to stop him teaching some shitty extra to stay out of his way, blocking his explosions easily with little bursts of golden flames from his palm, with a look in those golden eyes like he was bored. Bored. Like he could beat Katsuki any time he wanted, like he wasn't worth his full attention. Growling to himself, Katsuki tore his attention away from stupid Deku, trying to focus on what Ishiguya-sensei was saying. He's gone quiet again, it can't be good, said the voice, primarily Ishigo for a moment. There's a chance Yagi-kun could have gotten him, right? Replied, mostly, Hayato, sounding hopeful. I really hope so, but it seems unlikely. Last we checked, All Might had no idea where to find him, right? Cut in Izuku, staring, unseeing, out the window. We're sure that just telling All Might where to find him wouldn't work. Responded the voice, every voice at the same volume again. The voice shifted, Aoi, the incarnation immediately before Izuku, coming to the fore. He's still too young, even if we could let him know safely, there's too much of a risk he'd rush in to avenge Nana. It said, sounding kind, as it always did when it was mostly Aoi speaking. Izuku fought hard to avoid actually vocalizing a sigh. I know, but it's never sit right with me, just letting him run loose like this, us not even doing anything much to slow him. We know, and we're sorry, but you know we can't risk letting him take our quirk. We got really lucky he though Dai was my son, and that he still didn't want a weak fire quirk. Came the answer, sounding mostly like Dai and Ishigo. Yeah, I get it. Okay, so we just have to watch for what he might be up to. Where do we stand on the hero killer? Answered Izuku, turning to only slightly less hopeless prospects. Pretty interesting patterns there, we think. 2 to 4 attacks in an area, always heroes alone, or with one other, almost all found in alleys. Not a powerful quirk, or at least not something suited to drawn-out fights, especially against groups. Said the voice, almost evenly, before it contradicted itself. That mostly describes Amber, and we all know their quirk could take out a group with little difficulty. This was mostly from Ren, the quietest of the pieces of the voice. True, but we're cautious beyond all reason. Remember what the survivors said? If this guy could take out groups of heroes, he would, argued Izuku. Heads up, Ishiguya-chan just asked us for the past perfect of jump. Interrupted Yugo, who was on reality watch today. Had jumped. Replied Izuku immediately to the question which he had not actually heard. Correct, well done. Said the teacher, trying not to look surprised that the boy, who moments before had clearly been looking out the window absently, had answered accurately. She didn't need to know that Ren had spoken fluent English, and allowed the others free access to that knowledge. Izuku was already directing his attention inwards again before the second syllable, trying to ignore the grinding of teeth from Bakugo. So shall we make a move immediately, or wait until he changes hunting ground to be safe? The voice was saying, sounded, Izuku thought, most like Ishigo, Ren and Dai. Do you really think I'm ready for someone as presumably dangerous as Stain? Dream training or no, I thought you said I was still too young for high-skill targets. Interjected Izuku into the internal discourse. You are, but while he's skilled we can assume he relies on ambushes and is close combat specialized. If we get the drop on him, or even fight evenly, but from a distance you will be fine," answered the voice. "Actually, given that we are sure he's an ex-vigilante, and a recent one at that, there's a pretty good chance he'd hesitate to kill a child, or even refuse altogether, which could net us a big opening," added Aoi, showing her amber side for once. "All right. So when and where do we move?" asked Izuku, opening his current quirk notebook. After class, Izuku started to pack away his things, still mostly focused on his internal discussion, quickly devolving into headache-inducing argument territory, the different parts of the voice beginning to talk on their own, often over one another. "Here we go again," came the resigned voice of Yugo, only the second thing he had said all day, drawing the attention of Izuku and the rest of the voice back to reality, only to see Katsuki approaching them, usual scowl firmly in place. "What the sheet, Deku?" growled the blonde. "Echihaken, what's wrong?" stuttered out the shorter boy as the blonde came to loom over him. "Don't call me that, fucker. What are you playing at? You were even more spaced out than usual. Do you think you can FNG compete with me when you don't listen to what we're supposed to be learning, huh?" demanded Bakugu, eliciting a low, Aoi-predominated growl from the voice. "I'm not trying to compete with you, Kaken, and IW is paying attention, I swear," Izuku responded, timidly looking down. The fiery boy seemed to grow somehow more enraged at that, small explosions popping from his palms. "So I'm not worth competing with still, shitty nerd? And the other extras might believe that sheet, but I'm not dumb enough to fall for it. You were looking out the window half the class, and scribbling in your stupid quirk notebook the other half." He spat, glaring at the shrinking flame user. "I think you're worth competing with Kaken. But English isn't really a competition, is it?" Izuku answered, hoping to placate his childhood friend, and turn attention away from the book, currently full of coded plans for vigilante work. "Of course it is, and I intend to win, so you had better take it seriously, shitty nerd." Bakugu narrowed his eyes, "and stop ifing just staying up all night, USCK, but at hiding it. If the stupid teachers start making trouble for Auntie because you're always dead on your feet, I'll kill you," finished the blonde, before spinning on his heel, and storming from the class, leaving the frazzled greenette to finish packing, as the voice started its usual post-Bakugu commentary session. That evening, after waking from a post-dinner nap, to make sure Bakugu wouldn't start to get suspicious of Izuku's lack of sleep, the greenette waited for his mother to go to sleep, pretending to be asleep himself for her usual checkup. "She does tend to worry a fair bit, doesn't she?" said the voice, not for the first time. "Yeah, makes me worry we aren't as discreet as we think." "Let's hope it's unrelated," replied Izuku, slipping silently out of bed and grabbing the bag with his amber garb from its hiding spot underneath. "She's our mother, she's going to worry, they all do, to one extent or another," answered the voice, Aoi slightly edging out the others. A sigh. "In that case we just have to make sure and not give her any more reason to worry than we have to," said Izuku, slowly opening his bedroom window, careful not to make a sound. When Izuku was outside, standing on the fire escape, he equally carefully closed the window after himself. Jumping down to the ground with a roll, Izuku asked, "So where's today's cache, Aoi?" Aoi came to the fore of the voice. "Not far, kiddo, there's a warehouse about 10 minutes from the meeting spot." Izuku felt the strange sensation he always did when new knowledge was dumped in his head, as Aoi gave him access to her memories of where the warehouse was, and a couple of other associated thoughts. Empty road at night. Was fabrics. Was wait, called Izuku, trying to digest the new information. "If you own the warehouse, why did you put the cache in a tree?" "Remember we left these caches for you," answered the voice. "If the new owners of the buildings remodeled or just knocked them down, they would have found them. Much better to put them places people were least likely to look." Izuku nodded at that. It made a degree of sense at least. A couple of the caches had been gone when he went looking for them, requiring another walk to the next nearest, but most had been where they were left. Setting off, Izuku mostly focused his attention on not tripping over his feet, while the voice started to scrutinize everything Izuku sensed for anything suspicious. The problem with being young, they had always found, was that people tended to either think you needed help if they found you out in the city, alone, at midnight, for some reason. Either that or they thought of you as an easy target. It had never happened to Izuku, but Ren had once shared a memory of having to fight off a group of 3 thugs with unsavory intentions, who had taken to following him on one his night jaunts. If Izuku recalled rightly, they had been 12 at the time. After a couple of moments of confusion, as the decades-old memories failed to account for new buildings or the absence of old ones, Izuku arrived at the warehouse. Well, at least this place hasn't changed much, it seems, sighed the voice, put out as ever by buildings not being where they remembered. Izuku swiftly climbed the fence around the outside of the building and headed for the tree they remembered. Jumping to a low-hanging branch, he contemplated using a burst of flame to help him climb more easily, but discounted it. Don't want to draw attention to ourselves, remember? He thought. After climbing a couple of branches higher, Izuku arrived at what he thought was the right spot, and sure enough, there was the hollow. It couldn't be seen from the ground, but it was big enough for the little plastic safe box Aoi had placed there nearly 20 years earlier. Still there a few. If it weren't the next nearest cache would have made us late for our meeting, sighed the voice, relieved. He'd wait. We're a very valuable client, and he knows it, replied Izuku. Izuku grabbed the box, put it in his bag, checked there was nothing else in the small space, then began to climb back down. Getting to the ground, Izuku hurried back out of the warehouse, not wanting anyone to catch him trespassing. Though Izuku thinks he probably still owns the warehouse one way or another, the voice tended not to go into detail about the trusts. Finding the nearest public bathroom, Izuku went in, before locking the door. He quickly washed his hands before donning his amber disguise, wig, dark many-pocketed clothes that didn't restrict movement, dark contacts to hide the distinctive eyes, before quickly hiding his freckles with makeup and turning his attention to the box. It was locked, as were most of Aoi's caches, but some quick work with the picks had it open. Inside was what he had come to expect, a phone and fake passport, both intended for if Appai had ever needed to use a cache herself, and a large sum of money of various denominations. The passport was quickly incinerated. Izuku didn't want anything incriminating on his person unless was useful, as was the long-dead phone. The money was quickly counted, and the amount Izuku would need for tonight's meeting separated into a pocket, the remainder going into the bag alongside his civilian clothes. Let's get going, he would wait, but if he's still in town, Stain won't, said the voice, hurrying Izuku to the meeting place. Jiren was not looking forward to this meeting. Don't get him wrong, the kid was a very important client, regularly buying equipment and information and always paying promptly. But there was something about the kid. It might be partly because he was a kid, or at least looked like one. Jiren had never worked with a kid before, only really worked much with people he had reason to trust, but the kid knew his way around his sort of business. Somehow, knew where to find him and what sorts of questions to ask right from the first. Worse, he had managed to avoid Jiren learning anything about him. He never slipped anything useful. Jiren had just finished his last cigarette, but he already felt the need for another. Just then the door opened, revealing the short form of Amber, wearing the same dark clothes as he did to every meeting since the second Amber had requested them, minus a few later additions, at their very first meeting. Amber, called the broker, nodding to the dark-haired kid. You have what I asked for last time? Asked Amber, giving Jiren an even look. Ah, there was the other reason Amber made Jiren uneasy. A kid should not have eyes that intense. No one should have a gaze that intense. Jiren felt that he was being weighed any time Amber even glanced at him. Only a couple of his clients could ever do that, and they were all high-ranking villains, or especially skilled vigilantes. Keeping his calm facade, the broker reached beside his chair, for the small package there. Yes, though it probably isn't exactly the same as Endeavor's, I had them made as close as possible, like you requested. Amber took the package and opened it, revealing long gloves, designed to come all the way up to the elbows, as fireproof as Jiren was able to make them. Inspecting the gloves, the kid asked, "And you're sure these could withstand flames as hot as the Flame Hero?" As sure as I can be, a lot of fire quirk users use similar materials, and some of them have flames nearly that hot. The kid reached into a pocket, retrieving a small blowtorch. You don't mind if I test them? So, not a fire quirk then? Or are they just trying to throw me off? Go ahead. The kid lit the torch and held the flame against part of the glove for a while, before checking that the material was undamaged. "You do good work as ever," said Amber, pulling a small wad of cash from another pocket and stowing the blowtorch. Jiren took the money, but didn't bother counting it. Amber wouldn't shortchange him and hadn't for any previous deal. "So, any news on the Shibuya incident?" asked the kid, repeating the question from the meeting where he requested the gloves. "Not since last time. Commission is still keeping everything under wraps. Official story is an earthquake, but some sort of quirk still seems more likely," replied the broker, still not sure why the kid wanted to know about that incident especially. "All right then, I'll contact you if I need anything else," said the kid, turning to leave just as calmly and silently as he had entered. As he was leaving the smoky office Izuku had met Jiren in, he struggled to simultaneously walk away calmly and bring his racing heart back to a reasonable pace. "I didn't stutter or let anything important slip, did I? He probably is going to figure out who we are and where we live now and dash," he asked the voice, trying not to let his eyes dart about in search of potential watchers. "You did fine, kid. We didn't notice you giving anything away, and you didn't stutter once. You did a good job," cut in the voice, trying to calm his post-talking to someone anxiety, always worst when talking to someone as Amber. "Try to calm down, just keep an eye on not tripping up, and we'll make sure no one follows us, okay?" "Sure, I can do that. We need to find a bathroom to test the gloves out properly, so we can go look for stains still, right?" "Only if you're feeling up for it, Izuku. It's more important that you're at your best before we go looking for him," said the voice, soothing. After spending 10 minutes clutching the sink of a new public bathroom, going through a breathing exercise to calm his heart rate, and a further 10 testing the new gloves, Izuku was ready to go. Hopefully they would be able to find the hero killer before he found another victim. The gloves had originally been Ren's idea, fireproof, heat-insulating fabric to let him use his flames as armor over his forearms for longer without scorching himself, or even letting the flames get closer to his arms safely. These gloves were far better than the originals, it seemed, letting Izuku use the armor technique for a long time without issue. In a real fight, Izuku thought he might actually run into overheating from attacking before he had to let the armor go. Those should make for a much safer fight against a close-range opponent, but hopefully it still won't come to that," said the voice as they were leaving the bathroom. Yeah, go for an ambush if at all possible. Avoid close combat. Don't let Kaizome cut us, but if he does, make sure he can't get the blood. Anything else to remember?" listed the boy, making his way to where they had decided was the most likely hunting ground for. "Don't be so lax," chided the voice, "and remember that this guy won't go down easily. He's got experience against a greater variety of opponents than you, and enough training to bring down pros," continued the voice, shifting into Ren. "Okay, fair point," replied the boy, stymied. "He probably won't. What do we do if we can't avoid close combat? Probably our best bet is to focus on destroying as many weapons as we can." While he was still a vigilante, he preferred swords and knives. He will be less dangerous without, and might even try to run. But he'll have a lot of them. "Be careful," answered the voice, watching the shadowed alleys nearby for any signs of movement. When Izuku arrived at their suspected hunting ground, he immediately went looking for a fire escape and made his way to the roof of the nearest building. "Here comes the tedious bit," thought Izuku as he began the long task of searching the area. For the next half hour, Izuku followed each hero patrol route he knew from above, checking to make sure the most likely targets were where he expected, jumping from building to building, and looking down into each alley he passed, spiraling outward to search the area they had agreed was most likely where Stain made his base. Stain didn't attack every night. The voice thought that meant he probably chose his prey in advance, and learned their patterns for a few days before striking somewhere convenient. They had hoped that Izuku would be able to find the hero killer stalking one of the local heroes, so he could just follow him back to his base of operations. He was not. When the voice spotted movement out the corner of Izuku's eye in an alley below the building he was on, Izuku turned to look at it, and his eyes widened in shock. The hero killer was standing in the alley, already raising a heavily notched katana, standing over an unmoving hero, presumably preparing to finish them off. Izuku have any time to think, throwing a quickly condensed fireball, carefully angled to not hit the hero if it missed. Stain's awareness and reaction times were almost inhuman, spotting the glow of the approaching fire almost instantly and dodging back, away from the hero, and out of the path of the attack. The fireball hit the ground, dissipating after a moment, leaving a small glowing mark where the killer had once stood. No plan survives first contact with the enemy, it seems. We need to get down there, he'll probably kill the hero if we don't, said the voice, Rin taking the fore as he always did in combat. Izuku could sense the voice carefully watching Kaizome, ready to alert him to even the smallest movements. Izuku jumped from the roof, careful to keep the masked man in view, and reached for the wall. Coating his hands and arms in flame, he grabbed it with one hand. The concrete began to melt under the carefully pitched heat of the flames, as Izuku's arm took the strain of slowing his descent from that height. In Izuku's other hand, another concentrated flame was already being formed. A couple of feet from the ground, Izuku pushed away from the wall, landing between the fallen hero, still not moving. Stain must have been able to use his quirk, and his attacker, leaving a livid, glowing claw mark running most of the way down the building. Stain hadn't moved, sword still at the ready, but, seemingly, simply curious about who had interrupted him. He's cautious, this is not good. We've got to guard the voice said, watching the man, like it would a viper. It cut off as Stain's eyes widened slightly, having finally gotten a good look at Izuku. A child? I have no interest in killing a child, but I have to keep this fake from tarnishing the name, hero, any longer, leave, said Stain, lowering his blade slightly. Kid, run, it's too dangerous, you're going to get yourself killed, came the much fainter voice of the hero from behind him. Izuku risked a quick glance back at the hero, and was not reassured by what he saw. In the firelight, the hero's costume was a bodysuit and cape made of many different colored patches. The patchwork hero, calico, Izuku's mind supplied, but most of those patches were now dyed red from what looked like a serious guy wound. He's going to bleed out if we don't do something, and fast, came the hurried advice of the voice. Izuku ignored the hero. We need to get Stain away from him, and cauterize that, now, thought Izuku, keeping his hands raised, ready, and preparing a third concentrated flame in his empty hand. If you stand between me and my duty, I will fight you, and the weaker will be called, said Stain, raising the blade again, and stepping forward. Izuku responded by throwing one of his fireballs, intending to make it explode into a scattershot to prevent Stain dodging it, but before it even began to separate, Stain had already dodged, rushing into striking range in an instant. Sheet, he's fast, thought Izuku, panicked, as he raised his arm to catch the oncoming sword blade with the hand still holding a dense flame. As the blade entered the flame, it slowed, acting as if it were trying to cut through marshmallow, not air, and then quickly melted, losing its sharp edge and allowing Izuku to catch it firmly in his gloved hand. Izuku launched a new attack of his own in the instant Stain paused, stopping the now shattered fireball behind the killer, and trying to punch him in the gut with his flame-wreathed left hand. The man responded quickly, letting go of his trapped blade, jumping backwards and pulling out a pair of long tactical knives. Izuku dropped the sword, the flame falling with it, reducing it to a puddle of molten iron, before fading. Immediately afterwards, Izuku pulled the shattered fireball back together, and started forming a new one in each hand. We need to get the hero out of here. Stain has too many weapons for us to destroy before he's too far gone to save, and he's too fast for us to knife, started Ren, before cutting himself off, noticing Stain throw one of the knives toward Izuku. Izuku moved the partially formed flame in his left hand to intercept the thrown knife, preparing for Stain to follow it, finishing the right-hand flame and moving the reformed flame closer. The knife was going faster than Izuku expected, embedding, still hot from the flame, slightly into his left arm. Stain moved in just behind it, stabbing down for Izuku's shoulder. Izuku acted by long-honed instinct, making a large burst of low-concentration fire right in front of himself, forcing the hero killer to back up, lightly scorching his own eyebrows. The reformed flame came back into reach, but Izuku didn't dare risk using it to attack the maddeningly fast man. Instead, he pulled it right to his left hand. Finally, this had better be enough, thought Izuku, bringing together the two dense flames in his hands, before hurriedly pushing them forward, trying to get them out before the burst faded fully. Izuku's arms made a separating motion and the huge flame exploded outward, forming a brilliant wall of scorching flame, arcing around and over the boy and the hero, separating them from their attacker. Izuku swiftly turned, praying that the dome was enough to prevent any knives from passing, and faced the hero. In the bright light of the flame wall he looked even worse, pale, still bleeding from a gut wound, not moving to hold it because of Stain's quirk. "We can't move him like this, we'll have to cauterize here," said the voice, slipping out of sounding like just Ren. Izuku put out the armor on his arms, and the flame of his right hand, still, using the left to feed a constant stream of flame to the dome, replacing any lost heat. This is going to take some precision, he thought, walking toward the hero, who looked like he was in shock. Unsurprising, given that a kid just fought off the hero killer, and still has a knife in his arm, said the voice, Hayato coming to the fore. Blinking, Izuku turned to see the knife, still embedded slightly in his left arm. "Him first, we won't bleed out from this anytime soon," thought Izuku firmly. Looking down at the hero, Izuku raised his right glove to remove it with his teeth, before pushing it towards the hero's mouth. The, probably delirious, hero looked confused, so Izuku mimed, opening his mouth wide, not daring to talk in front of the man, and the hero followed along, allowing Izuku to place the glove inside. "Sorry, this is going to hurt. A lot," thought Izuku, lighting a small flame in his right hand according to what Hayato had told him to do, and trying not to wince in sympathy. Chio wasn't sure what she was expecting to find after being woken up by frantic banging on her door at 3 in the morning, but it was not a pale, half-conscious hero, slumped just outside her apartment. Gasping, she rushed forward, already trying to assess the damage. Gut wound, must have lost a lot of blood from the stains on his costume, then, he did not get here on his own with a wound like that. She glanced around for whoever had presumably carried the half-dead man to her door, and made sure she knew he was there, but saw no one. Coming closer, she got a good look at the wound itself, definitely a stab wound, not very wide, but deep, and someone cauterized this. Someone who knew what they were doing. She added, noting the minimal unnecessary burns in the bright hallway lights. Chio planted a quick kiss on his forehead, activating her quirk. This sort of thing was always a risk. She didn't know how bad things were internally, nor how much he could take, but she tried to stabilize him as much as she dared, already pulling out her phone. First things first, he needs a hospital, and from the looks of things a transfusion. Izuku rushed back home, bandage on his left arm slowly reddening. Sheet, I let Stain get away. He could attack again any time, maybe even today, and he began berating himself in his head. Izuku, calm down. He won't attack anyone else tonight. He's never shown himself to be an opportunist, and you saved that hero, that's the important thing. Interrupted the voice, cutting short the spiraling ramblings. But he is going to attack again, and if he's cautious he'll move to a different part of town. We'll have to wait for at least one more attack before we find him again. You couldn't have done any more. Izuku listened to us, you saved that hero, and held off an extremely experienced villain. You should be proud of that, said the voice, always voice soothing as always. Did we save him though? He lost a lot of blood while we tried to bring Stain down. Asked Izuku, remembering how pale the hero had been as they had carried him away from the alley. Wishing he could have gotten enough fire together to make that wall from the start. If anyone can help him, it's Shizenji-sensei. She healed us from worse, she knows what to do. Assured the voice, sending an image of the aftermath of a badly failed mission as Aoi, recovery girl listing the injuries, and looking like she wanted to add to them. After a pause, it went on, sounding more like Hayato this time. Now come on, we need to get you home, we couldn't see well enough to tell if you would need stitches for that. Yeah, I can do that. A sigh. Well, if they didn't already, the police definitely know we have a fire quirk now. When he finally woke from the surgery, and exhaustion from all the healing quirks applied to him, Calico's first words were to ask what happened to the kid. When police and hospital staff asked who he meant, the hero explained that he had been saved by a kid who had fought off his attacker using a powerful fire quirk and then carried him to help. The description of the kid as well as the use of fire matched amber, so they called Detective Tsukachi. This was not how I expected to begin my day, though Naomasa, making his way past the police cordon around the scene of the attack, another sighting of Amber, but nothing to show for it. Amber continuing to let themselves be seen is another point in favor of a copycat. If it is a copycat, and not someone who just looks much younger than they are, Naomasa needed to catch this kid, and soon, assuming they kept going after dangerous targets like Stain. The alley was a scene of concentrated devastation. Char marks, small craters in the stone, little puddles of once molten metal, most about the size of large knives, one presumably from a sword, a big puddle of drying blood. And then there were the big bits of property damage, furrows in the concrete, where someone had apparently melted part of the wall, a thick arc of soot on the pavement, and a matching one climbing the wall joined to it. And the hole. The place where someone, presumably Amber, had melted right through the wall in a rough door shape, and then kicked the loose section inward. Apparently the fire that had made the arcs around the blood and the new doorway had attracted a few nearby heroes, but before any heroes who were able to get rid of it, or get through somehow, it had dissipated on its own, revealing the mostly empty alley, and no sign of whoever had made it. Amber seemingly became a greater mystery with each new incident. Not just a fire quirk, but a powerful fire quirk, from the ease with which they had melted the wall. And now they had moved on from unskilled or non-violent criminals to Stain of all people, but had either realized they weren't going to win, or prioritized saving the hero over the capture. It didn't make sense with that sort of mindset, and that level of skill, they should be a hero or hero in training, so why go vigilante? And who had trained them? Another vigilante, but who? And what? Come to that, how did they know where Recovery Girl lived? And that wasn't even mentioning their weird link to All for One. It wasn't reasonable to think that Amber avoided everything tied to him by mere chance. They knew about All for One, or at least knew about his empire, and what was part of it. Naomasa felt a headache coming on. He needed to get whatever he could about Amber from this, then check on Tashinori. Hopefully Gran Torino would be able to keep him from getting up until he got there if he woke. The next morning Izuku woke up groggily. The knife wound, thankfully, had not been bad enough to need stitches. But it still stung like hell as he got ready for school. He had spent too long cleaning and bandaging it, then making sure there was no blood in the bathroom, so now he was tired enough that they were sure Bakugo would notice something even with the wound itself hidden by his uniform. God, that hurts. Why do we have to be too young to go to Shizenji? Asked Izuku sarcastically as he was heading out the door. Even if we could go to Shizenji, you'd probably be even more irritable, having to go to school that tired. Just take some painkillers, answered the voice. There aren't any in the house and we're too young to buy them, thought Izuku. The voice seemed to consider that for a minute. I'm not going to Jiren for something like painkillers, that would be stupid, added Izuku, preempting the voice's most likely suggestion. We let you make your sarcastic suggestions, said the voice, sounding put out. Don't forget, it's Thursday, you need to head to the shop before school. Oh, thanks, I had forgotten. Hopefully we'll be able to learn something useful, answered Izuku, swerving to enter the shop near his house. 10 minutes later, Izuku was sitting in class, desperately avoiding the temptation to open the magazine he had purchased. Someone would surely notice the resultant muttering if he tried to read it in class, even if he didn't take notes. Izuku waved when Bakugo entered, earning a scowl from the explosive blonde. Hey, Kaken. Deku, growled the taller boy, you had better have gotten some effing sleep last night, shitty nerd. Yeah, I did, Kaken, a bit anyway, stuttered Izuku. Bakugo studied Izuku for a second, narrowing his eyes at whatever he found. Well, you should FING get more than that. You still look like sheet, even under the FING makeup. Are you gonna study for the shitty English test with me at lunch? Shitty extras would be useless to study with. Sorry, Kaken, said the brunette, holding up the magazine. It's Thursday. The blonde sneered at the cover, which read, Bi-Weekly Heroics. I don't get why you read that shitty thing every week. Their pictures are crap, and even your shitty analysis is better. I really like their comics, and the analysis is okay, P+, it's better to have another perspective. Fine sheet nerd, but you had better not F up on the test. Bakugo said, before stalking off to his own desk. At lunch, Izuku took his bento to eat in the shade of a tree outside the classroom and opened the magazine at last. Bi-weekly Heroics, as it was now called, had originally been started by Ren, who had intended it as a way to get information about AFO and other notable heroes and villains without leaving any suspicious emails lying around, or having to meet informants in person. A lot had changed about the publication since its beginning. Both name and format had shifted to keep the Surface Company profitable, but one thing that remained unchanged were the codes. The magazine had its readers and its readers. The readers knowing some of all of what was hidden in it. Izuku was very much a reader. Reading through an article supposedly on Kamui Woods, Izuku swiftly picked out a second, much shorter article, this one about recent Amber movements, hidden in the first. Looks like the network's mole in the police is still reporting, thought Izuku, turning over to a comic about Endeavor. Shibuya update number 1 seen nearby last confirmed. Izu turned pale as he read the short message, which was hidden in the cross-hatching of the comic's art. Sheet, he couldn't have found his base in Shibuya, could he? Looking likely, who else could have caused that shockwave? But the lack of new sightings is bad, said the voice, sounding worried. Surely the commission couldn't hush up the death of the number 1 hero? Thought Izuku desperately. It's unlikely, but possible. We need to learn more. He vanished soon after Shibuya, it looks like, so we should look for Toshinori. Toshinori wouldn't be able to hide from his allies properly, unlike him, answered the voice, trying to regain its own calm, with limited success. Yeah, but how do we find him, if even the network hasn't seen him since Sunday? Gran Torino, or Sir Night Eye, or Recovery Girl. They are the most likely to know where he is, rambled Izuku to himself, fervently avoiding thinking about the possibility that One for All might have fallen. Whatever happens, we can't risk Sir. He's too skilled at investigation, and his quirk far too dangerous for us. Going near Shizenji again so soon isn't wise either, which leaves us with Sorahiko. Assuming he hasn't moved, we should be able to find him without any trouble, said the voice, only slightly less hysterical than Izuku's thought process. Okay, we need to call Mom, then we can just get the train to his apartment after school, thought Izuku, calming somewhat now that they had a concrete plan, and pulling out his phone. Sorahiko was sure he was losing his mind. He had started jumping at shadows, imagining he was being followed to the hospital, which was absurd. No one knew who he was, a hero about as unknown as a hero could be. But now he kept looking over his shoulder, and feeling like he was being watched by someone. He's dead. No one is likely to mourn him, and no one even knows that Toshi is hurt. Now stop trying to raise your blood pressure, thought the aging hero at himself, getting on the train to the hospital, alongside some middle schoolers from their uniforms. After the short train journey, rendered interminable by the constant itch between his shoulder blades, Sorahiko walked the short distance to the hospital where, unbeknownst to all but a very select few heroes and doctors, the number 1 hero was currently being treated. Hospital, okay, that's a good sign, means he's still alive at least, said the voice, as some of the tension left Izuku's shoulders. I'm sure we were worrying over nothing anyway. Even someone like Toshinori surely wouldn't do something as stupid as fight Kansei without first passing on One for All, said Ishigu and Dai, splitting off from the rest of the voice. Probably not, but it's a risk we can't afford to take. Toshinori is an emotional man, and he really cared about Nana-san. When he learned where All for One was, somehow, he could very well have charged in immediately to avenge her. The other components of the voice answered, echoing Izuku's own thoughts. Well, either way, we need to know where One for All is, and what All Might's condition is like, assuming he is here, thought Izuku, moving into the hospital, discreetly entering through a side door. After a couple of false starts, Izuku managed to find the room that All Might was in by hiding above the ceiling tiles, and checking every room in the most likely departments. He was in a single room near general surgery. Sure he's dead, Toshi? Came the voice of the elderly hero, just as Izuku moved the ceiling tile of the room slightly to check it. Yes, sensei, no one, no matter what quirks he had, could have survived having their skull caved in like that. Not to mention the building falling on them afterwards. Came the firm reply, from a tired-sounding All Might. I believe you, kid, I just had to be sure. Now how are you feeling? The doctors wouldn't tell me how bad it was before you woke up, said Gran Torino, placating. Not sure. I'm glad I don't have to worry about him anymore, but I shouldn't have done it like that. I'm a hero, answered the injured hero, before his teacher cut him off. You did the right thing. We both know that that man wouldn't stay in prison very long. No matter what methods they used, he would find some quirk to get out eventually. That or one of his pawns would break him out, said the tiny hero, and you wouldn't have gone that far anyway, if there weren't risks to the civilians outside. Now, how badly hurt are you? Pretty bad, Sensei. I should be able to get out in a couple of weeks, with Chiyo's help anyway, but he took a good chunk out of my side. Most of a lung and a fair bit of my digestive tract. The doctors tell me it will be hard for me to avoid losing weight, answered the taller man with a sigh. And do you think you can keep working, or more importantly, that you should keep working? Quizzed Gran Torino, after skiing in through his teeth. I'll be able to, for now at least, maybe not for as long. I'll have to use my quirks sparingly to avoid making things worse. I have to keep working, the people still need their symbol, but I think I'll start looking for a successor. Hopefully I can find someone worthy before I stop being able to use my quirk. What? He went to his confrontation with Kansei, still holding one for all. Screamed the voice, sounding like it wanted to go down there and finish the injured hero off, forcing Izuku to clutch his head. I doubt I could stop you, came the far calmer response of Gran Torino, though goodness knows I should, and Sir and Chiyo will doubtless try. Just promise me, don't go back to work until the doctors clear you, he continued, standing to leave, and try not to do everything alone. I don't know how the fortune-telling brat will take this, but you have other people willing to support you, okay? Yes, Sensei, said All Might, sounding chastised. Chiyo would probably kill me if I tried. Good. I'll try to visit again tomorrow, just be patient with it, and think it through about the successor, before you do anything. Finished Gran Torino, before leaving, and shutting the door behind him. The voice never slept. Even when the current incarnation slept, the voice remained awake constantly, and it always saw whatever he or she saw, dreams included. When Dai was young, and Ishigo had little experience with the new aspect of their quirk, Ishigo's voice would often wake him, but as Dai entered his 20s, Ishigo discovered he could nudge Dai not into wakefulness, but just into lucidity. More importantly, they found that it was possible for them to share control of the resultant not-quite dream. Izuku stood in his apartment in the dreamscape. This was the place he felt most comfortable, and so the scene that he defaulted to whenever he came here. Looking around, he spotted his quirk as he tended to imagine it, a golden bonfire, glowing in the middle of the living room, and ceded control over that part of the dream. The bonfire split off into 6 smaller flames, before swiftly morphing into 6 disparate men and women, the only commonality between them the golden eyes they all shared. Okay, Ishigo, you knew him best. What are the odds this is some sort of trick? Asked Aoi, standing on the far right as soon as the voice had separated itself and settled on a form. I probably won't sleep well until I see a body, but I doubt he would fake his own death. Kansei always liked power, and more importantly, using power. Answered the tall, middle-aged man on the far left. Yeah, Kansei always liked to gloat, and he hates anyone who takes up one for all. He wouldn't have left Toshinori alive if he were alive, added the blonde, scarred young man in a simple hero costume to Ishigo's left Dai. What about if he were just injured? Asked Izuku, trying to avoid getting too optimistic. Dai laughed at that, waving his hand at a wall. Izuku allowed the change, and the wall faded away, revealing a new room. In that room, All for One as he had been then stood, moving incredibly swiftly, and launching a wide variety of unpredictable attacks, likely using dozens of quirks, while Dai sprinted around launching fire, throwing knives, and barely dodging the numerous unknown quirks. Whatever burns or cuts All for One took healed in a matter of moments, while Dai's injuries only increased. If his regeneration was that good all those years ago, I think now nothing short of a killing blow could keep him from finishing what he started, said Dai, letting the memory fade, the wall reforming. The baby-faced man to the right of Dai, whose name What Yugo, formed a chair from the dream and sat. Turning to his left, he said, Rin, do you think your network would be able to tell if he's still active? Izuku, and the other parts of the voice turned to the gray-haired, heavily scarred man, one from the right, who scowled at the attention. It could, in theory, but it will take some time. And we would only learn whether his supporters thought he was dead. I'm with Ishigo. A body would certainly make us all feel safer. Yeah, but if All Might is right, we probably aren't getting one. How do you guys think things will go if he is dead? Asked Izuku. Injured or dead, I think we are going to have to lay low for a while, said the young woman, dressed almost exactly in Izuku's amber outfit on the far right. If people think the king of the underground is dead, everyone who knows there is a throne will be scrambling for it. Or at least they'll try going for a piece of his empire. It is going to be a mess for a good while. She waved her hand and formed still images of several people. I don't even want to think about what AFO's lieutenants are going to do, and the Yakuza and similar groups won't be much better. She has a point, growled Rin, gesturing to 3 of the figures, a bald little man, a man made of fog, and a rock-faced giant. This Kurogyri is cautious, he'll play it safe as much as possible, but the Doctor and Gigantomachia are both fanatics. Things could easily get nasty there. Besides, AFO's empire will probably begin to split apart without him, and that will cause a huge mess. Which might be our best way to tell that he is gone. Nodding, Ishigo and Dai turned to the last member of their little meeting. Hayato, we can hear you thinking from here. You haven't said anything, we would value your input, they said in unison. It sometimes worried the rest of the voice just how fully integrated Ishigo and Dai were. Yugo had been part of the voice nearly as long, and had never shown any signs of that sort of behavior. Hayato was probably the oddest member of the group, being the only one not dressed for some sort of combat, and instead wearing a white lab coat. The slender, white-haired man paused for a moment, looking around at the attention directed at him, before saying, "You know, I never really paid as much attention to the doings of AFO as the rest of you, and even if I can access those memories, I could easily draw the wrong conclusions. However, I am wondering how it was possible for Tashinori to force AFO to retreat, or even kill him." With a look of some satisfaction, the old doctor swiped away the images of the various villains that Aoi had conjured, before forming his own set of figures. 8 people, including a duplicate of Dai. On their left stood Mirai, and Tashinori stood on their far right. Dai and his apprentice, Aki, made up the middle figures. While Aki still held One for All, I saw how strong he was, and combined with how strong Mirai and Dai were, plus a few memories of Yuko, I felt sure that One for All wouldn't be strong enough to defeat All for One until the 10th user. I can't see how Tashinori is still alive. Have you seen Tashinori? Whatever else we can say about him, he is adding more base strength to the stockpile than any of us could have predicted, said Rin, chuckling. I think what's most likely thrown it off is just how weak the first few users were, put in Aoi, gesturing to the comparatively slender, emaciated in Mirai's case forms of the first 4 images. No offense, Dai. None taken, and I don't think we really helped with how short a time each of the first 4 held the quirk, said Dai, rubbing the back of his neck. It might be because he was quirkless, put in Izuku, causing the previous incarnations to turn to him, and thus causing him to blush at their shared attention. He doesn't have a quirk, so the whole stockpile is focused on making his body stronger, not splitting its efforts like with the others. A pause. Or it might be. We might not want to admit it, but the embers are weaker than the quirk itself. It was a stupid risk, but having the quirk might have been what did it. Finished Izuku. Possibly, admitted Dai, but it doesn't stop me from wanting to finish Tashinori off for taking such a huge risk. Oh well, it's done now, all we can do is hope for the best with his successor. So we're in agreement? Asked Hayato. We wait. If he's dead we should be able to find out within the next few months, and until then we can't really do anything without risking too much. The various pieces of the voice nodded. Agreed, said Aoi. Now, I think it's past time that we let Izuku get some proper sleep. He still needs to heal, and if we're taking a break from vigilante work, we can safely cut down on training. At that the others murmured agreement, before letting go of their piece of the dream, turning back into the golden bonfire, before the dreamscape itself faded, and Izuku fell into true sleep and unknowing dreams. Izuku felt great. He hadn't felt this relaxed in years. The voice probably hadn't felt this relaxed in centuries. Everything had gone according to their predictions for once. The underworld was tearing itself apart without All for One. Less than a month after their little eavesdropping session, Kurogiri had dropped off the map, cautious as always. The doctor had stuck to his legitimate business, though Izuku still didn't dare to remove him, despite Ren's protests, and he seemingly had cut ties with the underground about 2 months in. Apart from one brief, surprisingly non-violent incident during month 6, Gigantomachia had seemingly wandered into the wilderness. Izuku was getting more sleep, cutting vigilante work almost completely in the ensuing chaos. The voice had taken to occasionally giddily repeating "he's gone to itself," more and more of the incarnations seeming to genuinely believe it as time went on. They were free, they could do what they wanted without fearing they might doom everyone. Izuku had to resist the urge to giggle in class whenever he thought this. He had to keep up the illusion that he paid attention to classes like English and history. Halfway through their final year of middle school, Izuku finally broached a subject he had wanted to ask the voice about since they finally accepted that they had won. Now that All for One is gone, do why you guys think maybe we could try to get a Ichiro license? Asked Izuku on the way home from school, stuttering for once when talking to the voice, clearly nervous. We would draw attention if we did that. And attention is the last thing we want, said the voice immediately, but curiously sounding almost entirely like Ren. But Kansei is gone. Even if we draw attention, it won't be that much of a problem now, said the voice, contradicting itself, Ren's part now mostly absent. And we wouldn't have to draw that much attention if we stayed underground. Plus, if we had a license we could learn a lot of what the heroes know, said Izuku, playing to Ren's constant need to know everything. The voice switched, mostly sounding like Hayato. Now no one is likely to guess at what our quirk does, and anyway, it is Izuku's decision, we have no right to gainsay him. Ren, I admit there are advantages. There always were advantages to doing things above board like that. But Izuku has to understand the risks. If the heroes discover that we exist, there will be no end of trouble. And he will have to take care that Amber is not tied to him, which could end nearly as badly, countered Ren, separating from the rest of the voice entirely to make the point. I understand, Ren, really. I still think becoming a hero is the better option. I could help people much more easily if I could do it in the open, reassured Izuku, causing Ren to go silent for a few seconds, trying to make sure his warning had sunk in. Well, whatever you decide, you know you always have our support, said the voice, all 6 pieces in unison again. We'll always do whatever we can to help you, and keep you as safe as we can. It concluded, Aoi predominating. I know, I love you guys, I get that you're just trying to make sure I've thought it through, thought Izuku, seemingly grinning at nothing. Come on then, Inko said she was going to be making katsudon tonight, so you should hurry home, said the voice, sounding fond. 6 months later, Katsuki no idea what was going on with Deku lately, but at least the shitty nerd had started to take school a bit more seriously. The shitty nerd still jumped and stammered whenever anyone tried to talk to him, but he didn't spend every other class staring into space. Better yet, he started sparring with Katsuki. No quirks, but still. It was nice to have someone around who could put up a less crappy fight. Still not as good a fight as Katsuki, of course. Katsuki had no idea what had caused the change, probably some shitty sleeping pills or something, but he wasn't complaining. He was, however, complaining about the FING muttering from in front of him that started him thinking about shitty Deku, distracting him from what the teacher was saying. Shut the F up, Deku, he yelled, making his irritation known, and startling the nerd. Sorry, Kaken, squeaked the greenette, before finally shutting up. Katsuki turned back to looking at the teacher, who stood there with raised eyebrows, like he had the FNG ball to say anything to the only person in this shitty school with a shot at you. As I was saying, said the teacher, I'll be handing out your post-graduation destination forms. The teacher threw the forms in the air. But you all want to be heroes, don't you? He finished. The extras all started showing off their weak butt quirks. Katsuki sneered, like any of these extras could be heroes with those useless quirks. Don't lump me in with these losers, I'm the only one here with a shot as a hero, said Katsuki, eliciting the usual grumbling, but no real challenges from the cowards. Oh yeah, you're applying for UA, aren't you, young Bakugu? said the teacher, earning some odd murmuring about the difficulty of getting into UA. And young Midoriya too, I see. He added, causing shocked silence from most of the class. Deku had never made much of a secret of his lack of a desire to become a hero. What the sheet, Deku? Yelled Katsuki, after he had gotten over his surprise, jumping over to the nerd's desk, palms crackling. You say you don't want to be a hero all these years, and then you apply for UA. You think you can get the drop on me, huh? Demanded the explosive blonde, looming over the rapidly shrinking fire user. It's not like that, Kakin. Wouldn't lie to you like that, I swear, stammered out the shorter boy. You are always getting mad at me for playing hero and So you're effing half-butting things again, shitty Deku, yelled the taller boy, the firecrackers in his palm growing more intense. Boys, that's enough, return to your seats, said the teacher, probably worried Katsuki would destroy the desk. It had been one time. Katsuki sked angrily, but did as he was told. He'd talk to the shitty nerd after school. After school? I can't believe that, teacher, just up and announce that you were applying to UA like that, ranted the voice, sounding incensed. It doesn't really make a difference, guys. We were going to have to let Kakin know eventually. And the rest of the class would probably have found it, thought Izuku, packing his things away. Oi, sheet nerd, came the angry snarl from behind them, cutting off Izuku's answer. We aren't done here. Izuku tried to start before being interrupted. You are the only shitty person at this crappy school worth beating, the furious blonde buelled on, but you but everything. First you say you don't want to be a hero, and then you apply for UA. Well, I'm the one who's going to be number one, but so help me, if you but this like you do everything else, I'll FNG kill you. I'm going to beat you at your best, got it? Ranted Bakugu, before storming off without waiting for an answer. Well, that was something. No offense, Izuku, but you have strange taste in friends, said the perplexed voice. He must think we're belittling him, thought Izuku, immensely guilty as he finished packing and turned to leave. I wish we could just tell him why we didn't want to be a hero. Or just come up with some reason why we changed our mind. Izuku was more listless than he had been in half a year, wallowing in guilt for lying to his childhood friend, even as the voice simultaneously tried to console him and reminded him exactly why they had to lie. Izuku barely registered it, just keeping his mind on not tripping over his own feet. He did, however, register, if slightly too late, the warning shout from Ishigo, who was paying more attention to their senses. Izuku, run, there's someone coming up behind us. Izuku tried to move out of the way of the strange sloshing noise coming towards him, but before he could, he suddenly found himself engulfed in slime and unable to breathe. Don't struggle, this should only hurt for about a minute, said the slime, somehow. Some sort of fluid-based mutation, said the voice, rapidly transitioning to Ren. See if the slime is flammable at all. It isn't water. Izuku stilled his hands, scrambling at the slime over his mouth, trying unsuccessfully to calm his panic, and lit one hand on fire before bringing it to grasp part of the villain. I can put it out after it lets me go, he thought, desperately. That's a nice quirk you've got there, kid, but you can't burn me, I'm a liquid. Laughed the villain, not pulling back. Okay, we can't burn it, said the voice, forcing itself to sound calm. We should be able to boil it though. But that would burn me too, yelled Izuku internally, more desperate for oxygen by the moment, his lungs burning. Our heat resistance is definitely above his. We only need to outlast him. Make as much hot fire as you can quick, reassured the voice in a hurry, feeling how badly Izuku needed to breathe. Izuku swiftly formed a fire in each hand, as hot and dense as he could, before plunging both into the body of the villain. Black spots began to appear in Izuku's vision from the lack of oxygen, but the slime began to rapidly heat up. Izuku just had to hope he could force the slime to let go of him before he lost consciousness. When Izuku woke up, it wasn't 4 years later as part of the voice as far as he could tell, so that was a good sign. What happened? He asked the voice. Don't ask us. We get nothing while you're unconscious, but someone is clearly trying to wake you up. It answered as Izuku registered the rapid tapping on his cheek. Izuku snapped his eyes open, only to come face to face with Japan's most famous hero. He froze as, for the first time since before Aoi was born, the voice shattered. Sheet, we can't, we should, how did get away, that's, we need to yelled the voice, still talking in unison, but now saying completely different things, all overlapping in a discordant mess. Pain lanced through Izuku's head, as he stared, unseeing, at the hero, the voice trying to get him to do one of half a dozen things. Are you all right, kid? Do you remember what happened? Asked the number one hero with his usual jovial voice. All might. Stammered Izuku, managing to avoid wincing from the headache as the pieces of the voice realized their error and started to piece themselves back together, overcoming their blind panic at the idea of talking to a one-for-all user. Izuku shot up from where he was lying, trying to overcome the desire from Dai and Yugo to get away from this man as quickly as he could. That would certainly not help with avoiding attention. What happened, there was a villain, and stammered the boy. Never fear, young man, cut in the hero, holding up 2 plastic bottles filled with green liquid. A villain like that was no match for me, he continued, as Izuku tried to ignore advice on possible aliases from Ishigu, Dai, and Rin, along with advice to check on the hero's health from Hayato and Aoi, while Yugo tried to get them all to stop for a moment, the pain decreasing as his head stopped hosting 6 conversations and shifted down to 3. See, can I have your autograph? Blurted out the boy, defaulting to his base instinct on meeting a hero in the absence of any intelligible advice from the voice. Of course, young man, answered the hero, putting the bottles in his pocket. I'm always happy to give an autograph for my fans. Izuku pulled out a notebook from his bag, one of the coded notebooks on criminal organizations, but All Might didn't need to know that, and turned to a blank page, the voice silenced by this, admittedly surprisingly non-attention-grabbing, course of action from Izuku. See, could you write something like, you can be a hero, please, it would mean a lot, said the short boy, handing the notebook to the massive hero, who began to write in it. Sure thing, young Midoriya. Izuku, sir, squeaked the greenette. Here you go, young Midoriya, boomed the hero, handing back the signed notebook, which Izuku took with a bow. Thank you for your support, but now I need to hurry and take this criminal to the police station. Heroes have to fight time as well as villains. Izuku watched as the hero turned, crouched down, and used One for All to shoot into the sky with the 2 bottles, already running post-disaster analysis with the voice. Well, that could certainly have gone worse. He didn't even see our quirk, and he probably won't remember a random fan that well. I got his autograph, thought Izuku, dazed, reading the page with now read, you can be a hero, young Midoriya, All Might, beneath a silly doodle of the hero's iconic hair. Okay, so maybe only the voice was doing any analysis. But we really shouldn't have given our real said the Ren-dominated part of the voice, before it cut off. Come on, Izuku, let's get you home. I don't know how long we were out, but you're going to be tired, and Inko might begin to worry. Prodded Aoi, gently but firmly coming to be the main speaker. Nodding, Izuku clutched the notebook to his chest, beginning to make his absent way to his apartment. Toshinori had messed up. Badly. First, he had taken too long to track the elusive ball of sludge through the sewers, which could have easily gotten that green-haired kid killed, and now he had lost the bottles, and thus the villain again, when he was forced to drop his muscle form just before landing on the rooftop. As he rushed as fast as his one remaining lung would allow down the stairs, he prayed that the bottles had stayed sealed when they landed. Halfway down he heard a loud explosion. No such luck then. Toshinori redoubled his speed, ignoring his body's protests, and the part of his mind telling him that he wouldn't be able to do anything even if he did get down there. When Toshinori exited the building, it was to a scene out of a nightmare. The villain had taken a new hostage, just as young as the last one by the look of him. The street was on fire. Large explosions issued from the slime, more likely from the boy being subsumed by the villain, constantly adding to the patches of flame. The skeletal hero looked around the crowd, hoping to see any hero that might be able to help. Backdraft, no use against the slime, even if they weren't too busy keeping the fires under control. Kamui Woods couldn't stop a liquid villain, and couldn't work with all that fire. MD Lady, a much newer hero, but Toshinori knew she couldn't control her size between the two extremes, she wouldn't be able to get into the alley. Death Arms, not strong or fast enough for a hostage situation like this, he was simply helping keep the crowd back, waiting for a hero who could help. The only hero nearby who could have taken care of the sludge villain was Toshinori. And he was spent for the day useless. Out of the corner of his eye, Toshinori saw movement in the crowd. He looked on in horror as the green-haired boy he had rescued from the same villain just minutes earlier rushed out of the group of civilians and past the heroes, keeping them back with surprising agility, ignoring the shouts for him to stop from the panicked heroes. Without breaking stride, the reckless, stammering child dropped his backpack and reached into a trouser pocket, producing something small and seemingly glinting in the sunlight, a ball bearing, and threw it with a swift motion. The little glowing orb flew quickly and hit the villain, right in its eye. The villain screamed in pain and flinched massively. Backwards, the sludge releasing the blonde teenager's face and most of his torso, allowing him a gasping breath just as the greenette reached the pair. The blonde's eyes registered as shocked when the greenette, with a lot of strength for his apparently slight frame, yanked the blonde bodily from the recoiling sludge. Recovering from its flinch, the villain directed a baleful glare at the shorter of the two boys, the eye that had been hit seemingly badly damaged by the projectile. "You brat! You'll pay for that!" screeched the sludge, whipping a tendril of slime to try to crush the boy, who was trying to retreat with the newly liberated hostage. "Pathetic," growled Toshinori to himself, rapidly, and contrary to his body's fervent and loudly expressed wishes, shifting back to his hero form, and rushing to intercept the slime. What sort of hero sits back while a child fights a villain for him? Coming between the boy, who was raising his free arm, as if to futilely shield himself from the attack, and the attacking villain. Catching the attack, Toshinori forced his signature smile back onto his face, saying, "Never fear, for I am here." He reared back his other fist, shouting the name of one of his famous moves, Delaware Smash. And for the second time that day, the sludge villain was reduced to a series of unconscious puddles. This time as clouds rapidly formed, and it began to rain. Toshinori stood, answering questions as his body strained to maintain his muscle form, trying to keep the media away from the two boys, who had likely had a difficult enough day. Meanwhile, he could hear the other heroes showering the blonde with praise for his bravery and admonishing young Midoriya for his recklessness. He was half tempted to go over and ask the younger heroes to cut the kid some slack, but from the quietly defiant look on his face he would do it again in a heartbeat, so maybe he could use some self-preservation beaten into him, as his teacher had always said he himself needed. Once the paramedics were confident that the blonde, Toshinori heard him say his name was fine, and the heroes had finished lambasting the poor boy who had tried to save him, they went off together, Bakugo dragging young Midoriya by the arm away from the heroes and police, glaring fiercely and seemingly ranting quietly at the meek boy. "Huh, maybe they know each other. Well, either way, young Midoriya will make a fine hero, it seems," thought Toshinori, answering the reporter's questions, before slipping away with the rebottled villain. He might even make a good successor, he thought to himself, slipping back into his civilian form, careful not to drop the unconscious sludge this time, before shaking himself. But that's getting ahead of myself. Gran Torino is right, I need to think my choice through, whoever I pick, and I still have a few more years of heroing in me. If he's determined to become a hero, I'm sure I'll see him again, and I'll be able to see how he compares to this young Togata that Sir keeps trying to get me to meet. The few months following the sludge villain incident, and subsequent weird tirade about jumping in, like a FING moron, from Bakugo, were strange to say the least for Izuku. The voice still refused to condone any significant vigilante work, and it had massively cut back on dream training, instead focusing on pure physical training for strength and stamina. At Izuku's insistence, they also started on breathing exercises, but otherwise the only thing that broke the monotony of jogging, school, weight training, homework, sleep was sparring with Bakugo. By the end of it all, Izuku had put of a fair bit of weight, and increased how long he could hold his breath a fair bit. Bakugo was still insisting that he didn't need saving from a weak-butt villain like that, but a fair bit of the fire had gone out of his tirades. Izuku was sure he was feeling like a failure in some way for getting caught, and he felt guilty, but he still didn't think he could tell him that he had gotten caught by the same villain first. He was afraid Bakugo would blame him for the villain getting free. Not an unreasonable thing to blame me for, since it probably only happened because All Might was trying to hide his injuries from me, thought Izuku bitterly, as he rode the train to the UA entrance exam. "You're being silly, Squirt," said the voice. "How could you have stopped Toshinori from trying to hide it from you? And you couldn't have known that he would drop the villain anyway." "But still, if I had been paying more attention, and hadn't gotten caught argued Izuku, determined to blame himself. "Then you might have been able to beat the villain," interrupted the voice, sounding exasperated, "and it would have only caused more trouble. You would have had to explain what happened to the villain to All Might when he arrived, and he still would have taken him and flown off like that. You can't let yourself drown in what-ifs like this, kid." "I know, but But nothing, come on, this is our stop," said the voice firmly as the train stopped. "Drew a bit too much attention to yourself, but you saved your friend, and none of the heroes even noticed how you did it. Come on, you've got an exam to ace, hero." Izuku got off the train and made the short journey from the station to UA's entrance on foot, joining the crowd of hopefuls taking the exam this year. When he arrived at the gates of UA, he gaped. The voice had seen it before and shared memories of it with Izuku, but the massive H-shaped building still stunned him when he first saw it. "Get out the effing way, shitty Deku," came a yell from behind him as Bakugo bumped into him on his way into the building, knocking him out of his reverie. Turning back, he added, "You had better give it your all today, Shitnu. I only want to beat you at your best." Before continuing on. "Right, I need to focus, this is no time to get distracted," thought the greenette, taking an unthinking step towards the building. And immediately tripping over his own feet. "Here we go again," said the voice, resigned, as Izuku twisted instinctively into the beginnings of a forward roll. "How do you always trip when you aren't paying?" It cut off, as the ground stopped rushing up to meet the boy. "Huh, that's not what's supposed to happen here." It finished, deadpan. "Sorry, I didn't know you were going to do that," called a chirpy female voice from beside Izuku, sounding embarrassed. Izuku turned his head in midair to see a blushing brunette coming forward to right him. "I thought you were just going to fall. I shouldn't have used my quirk on you without asking like that," said the shorter girl, before bringing her fingers together and releasing your quirk. Izuku landed lightly on his feet. "And no worries, why you were just trying to help," stammered out the boy, caught between the voice's annoyance at the unsolicited quirk use and his own embarrassment at talking to a girl. "Yeah, it would have been bad luck if you fell before the exam, but it looks like you had it covered," she said, rubbing the back of her head. "Anyway, good luck with the exam," she added, before jogging off toward the building. "Well, she's certainly got the helpful spirit part of heroics down," commented the voice. "Come on, we don't want to be late. Watch your feet this time, okay?" It added, sounding amused. The written exam came first, probably to avoid people being too exhausted for it after all the quirk use in the practical. Thought Izuku, taking his seat. "All right, you have 90 minutes to complete the exam. If you feel you have finished and cannot earn any additional marks, you may leave after handing your paper to me. You may now begin," came the monotone rumble of Cementos from the front of the classroom. Amidst the rustling of papers, Izuku opened his own exam packet and entered what he jokingly called exam mode. Izuku read the first question and shared it with the voice, while the voice itself simultaneously read the next 6 questions. They then shared the content of the questions amongst themselves, and whichever component of the voice was most knowledgeable on the subject, usually Hayato or Yugo for academic subjects, Ren for languages, shared the relevant knowledge directly. Izuku's pencil rapidly began to scratch across the paper, almost without pause. By the 30-minute mark, every question had an answer written. At 40 minutes, all those answers had been audited, ensuring Yugo hadn't given the answer for historical questions as it really happened, as opposed to how it went down in records, and also making sure no one had muddled up the question order, and that all the answers seemed right to Izuku and each part of the voice. After one short debate on a science question, where the consensus had shifted since Hayato had died, they were satisfied they had done as well as they could. Izuku then spent the next 10 minutes pretending to be contemplating, and occasionally altering his answer to some questions in the middle of the paper, but in reality debating what the practical exam would be on with the voice. When he felt a believable time had elapsed, Izuku gathered his answer sheets and stood, taking them to the front. "I think I've gotten all the marks I can, sensei," murmured Izuku, proffering the sheets to the angular man. Are you sure, young man? Asked the teacher, sounding surprised, but taking the offered papers. DMN, still too quick. Oh well. Yes, sensei, may I be excused? He asked as quietly as before. Of course, if you're finished. Good luck with the practical. Intoned the cement man as Izuku bowed and left the room, feeling the gaze of the students who had noticed him getting up on his back. Now then, we've got 40 minutes to relax and find a snack before we have to go to the auditorium for orientation. Thought Izuku happily, hoping that the other exam takers would simply think he had failed and left early because of that. 30 minutes, a bottle of green tea and a granola bar later found Izuku sitting in the auditorium watching the other hopefuls trickle in. The first couple were noticeably surprised to see him sitting there already. How long have you been here, nerd? You had better not have FNG given up on the written test halfway through, growled Bakugo, taking the seat next to Izuku. And not long, Kaken, and I answered all the questions. I think I did okay, answered the flame user, opting not to tell his friend about the quest for snacks which took a lot of the exam time. Ichbinch, good, you'd better not half but the practical exam either, Deku, ordered the blonde, before turning to watch the other applicants making their way in. Why, Kaken, I won't, murmured Izuku as a figure made its way onto the stage at the front. Present Mike, the voice hero, thought Izuku, stars in his eyes at meeting the hero and radio host. His quirk is so cool, I wonder if that speaker is for control or... The internal mutter storm began, while the voice watched on silently. A few minutes later, when the last applicant had seemingly entered the room, the voice hero stepped up to the podium and began to speak. Welcome to the show. Can I get a yeah? Yelled the famously loud hero. Silence. I'm here to explain the rules of today's game, yeah. This year's practical will take place in our replica city, Woo. You'll have 10 minutes to earn as many points as you can, listeners. Your handouts will tell you which area to head to for the test, okay? Izuku looked down at his handout, which said Area B. Tisk, muttered Bakugo. They must have made sure people from the same school went to different areas. And I won't get to crush you myself. It's probably to stop people from helping out the people they know, or... Izuku began to mumble unintelligibly as the extravagant blonde began an explanation on how points were earned by disabling the 3 types of robots in the testing areas. Wait, what? Asked the voice, sounding disappointed. That's it? Surely that's going to cut almost everyone with mental quirks, or more subtle abilities. You think there's more to it? Asked Izuku, frowning and looking around as several other students began to frown too. One purple-haired kid began to look almost sick, and Izuku resolved to speak to him before the test. Said the voice, transitioning into a thoughtful tone, most likely. This is just a test of ability to break things, not heroics. And Midnight is a UA alum, right? She would have a really hard time passing this test. I doubt the teachers would make the test this badly biased toward destructive quirks. Eraserhead too, right? So what, some sort of hidden scoring system? Asked Izuku, but before the voice could respond a blue-haired teen stood and loudly interrupted the hero's explanation. Excuse me. I have a question, he explained, making rigid hand gestures. Earlier you said there were 3 types of robots, but the handout clearly states there are 4. If this is an oversight, I find it highly unbecoming of an institution such as UA. And you, he added, turning to glare at Izuku. You have been muttering this entire time. If you are just here to distract the other exam takers, you should leave. This caused Izuku to blush and try to sink through his chair. He hadn't known he was talking out loud. Bakugo chuckled, hearing someone else call out Izuku on his annoying FE muttering. Okay, called the voice hero. Good catch, examinee 7111. The 4th type of villain is different from the others. It's more of a hazard, the 0-pointer. You can destroy it if you want to, but you'd be better avoiding it, since it isn't worth any points. Well, that was rude, calling you out on your muttering like that, grumbled the voice, Aoi sounding like she wanted to give the tall boy a good talking to, while the hero at the front finished explaining the rules of the exam. But the 0-pointer is a good sign for there being a hidden scoring system, otherwise there would be no real point to it. Probably you get bonus points for trying to help others if they get in trouble? Guessed the voice, Hayato trying to divert Aoi from the subject of the loud kid. Yeah, it should be something like that. I think I'm going to go give the purple-haired guy a hint. From how he looked when the explanation began, I think he has a non-physical quirk, thought Izuku, making his way over as all the others moved to go to their testing areas. After Izuku had managed to hint to the tired-looking boy about the heroics points, thoroughly enjoying the hopeful light bulb visibly turning on in his head, Izuku made his way with the crowd to his own testing area. While the applicants were milling around, waiting for the test to start, Izuku spotted the brunette who had tried to help him earlier. I should go thank her, she seemed nice, and she tried to help when I tripped, thought Izuku, walking toward her, only to be stopped short by a hand on his shoulder. Ignorant of Izuku struggling to overcome his instinct to set fire to the hand unexpectedly placed on his shoulder from behind, the boy who had chastised him for muttering before said loudly, and in a stern tone, "That girl is clearly trying to concentrate, were you planning on trying to distract her from the exam?" Izuku shrugged off the offending hand, saying, "No, I was just going t-dash," stammered out the boy, ignoring Aoi chomping at the bit to tear the boy, who had wrong-footed her charge twice in a row, a new one, and the other parts of the voice trying to calm her, before being interrupted by a shout from a nearby rooftop. "And start!" screamed the present mic without warning. Izuku swiftly turned, and ran through the gate into the replica city at the voice's swift urging, quickly gaining a lead on almost all the other examinees. They've got the right idea. There's no countdowns in real-life, kids. Run! Cried the hero behind him, causing the other examinees to belatedly enter the area, trying to catch up with the ones who entered immediately. Izuku began to swiftly form his usual dense flames in each hand as he ran, already gathering enough fire to form the dome that had saved him from the hero killer twice over before he saw his first robot, a two-pointer. Izuku split off a small part of the fire from his right hand when he saw it, forming it into a thin vertical disc, rather than a ball, and sent it careening into the robot. The disc of brilliant flames stalled when it hit the barrier of the robot, but Izuku forced it onward, ignoring the resultant minor increase in body heat. The disc continued through the robot, losing heat all the time, and emerged, significantly colder and more dull, out the other side. The robot fell, smoking and glowing, the left and right halves falling away from each other. 2. Thought Izuku, who hadn't even broken stride. Overkill much? Called the voice, amused, breaking away from its study of the weaknesses of the two-pointer. If you destroy them all like that, you'll overheat within the first 5 minutes. Sorry, said Izuku, grinning like a madman, oblivious to the incredulity of the others behind him. I've just always wanted to do that, ever since I saw that time Ishigo did it. Well, try to be a bit more conservative destroying the rest, please. 1 pointer on your left. Chided the voice, fond. Izuku twisted the still cooling disc with a turn of his wrist, forcing it together, and creating a much smaller version of the original disc, raising the temperature back to how it started, before motioning it forward, sending it through the joints of the robot's exposed neck as it came out of the alley. 3. He thought, moving on as it collapsed to the ground in a shower of sparks, and the disc dissipated. After the first 2 robots, the voice had him test a theory. Sure enough, the 1 and 2-point robots stopped working if you destroyed the head. The people who had speed-type quirks passed him after he had destroyed 4 robots, but it didn't really matter, they could only thin the herd. Izuku began to get to work with greatly increased efficiency. 1-pointers were dispatched with a single fire spear to the head, 2-pointers with either a spear or a larger ball to knock them down. These things were stupidly fragile in some ways. 3-pointers took a bit more work, usually requiring a concentrated blast or 2 to destroy them, but from what Izuku heard the other examinees say, he was well ahead. At the 8-minute mark, Izuku was sweating and panting from running to find robots that others hadn't yet destroyed, and from the heat his quirk was constantly pouring into his body, testing the limits of his heat resistance. He had paused a couple of times on his path of destruction to interrupt a robot knocking an examinee down, or to rescue another one from under some debris, but other than that his quest for points continued unabated. 80, he thought, with satisfaction, as he dispatched a 3-pointer with a couple of large blasts of concentrated flames. He turned when his attention was caught by a loud crashing sound, coming face to distant face with the 0-pointer. Are they serious? How did they even get the money to build something that size? Thought Izuku incredulously, moving to keep out of the lumbering giant's way. "Ow wow," came the faint call from behind Izuku and the other fleeing students. When Izuku turned, he saw the girl who had helped him earlier, her leg caught under a piece of rubble. They wouldn't let an examinee get badly injured by one of their own robots in the exam, and we've already got enough points to pass, counseled the voice, but Izuku was already moving through the crowd going the other way with difficulty. They might have overlooked the rubble. If that had hit her head, she'd be badly hurt, said Izuku, getting free of the crowd and rushing forward. You won't be able to get her out in time, said the voice, switching to Ren for the first time in the exam. You will need to take out the robot and make sure it falls away. Izuku began to strengthen the flames in his palms, forcing them as hot and dense as he could before bringing the two together as he reached the girl. He watched the zero-pointer get closer as he forced more and more fire into the head-sized ball he now held between his hands, until it grew painful to look at, turning from its usual gold to a blinding, almost white color. Called the voice as Izuku began to get nervous that the robot was getting too close. He threw the ball. The small shining sphere contained nearly as much fire as Izuku could force into something that size. When it got close to Robot's head, he stopped trying to confine it. The tiny point of light rapidly grew into a massive conflagration 30 feet across, ramming into the robot's face. The robot's front plates caved in where they impacted the explosion even as they began to melt. The entire robot tipped over backwards with the force that had been suddenly thrown at its top half, and fell with a massive crash. Izuku had never done anything on that sort of scale before, outside of the not-quite dream anyway, but he was prepared for the sort of effect it would have on him. He stood there, panting as his body tried to sweat as much as it possibly could, desperately trying to counter the massive spike of heat that had just been driven through it, and reached for what little remained of the ice water he had brought for the exam. He turned, surprised to find the girl standing there, favoring one leg, next to a floating piece of rubble. "Good," he said, allowing himself to fall, on the ground. "I wouldn't be able to lift that now, I think. I'm Midoriya, by the way," he added faintly, before making a spirited attempt to replace some of the lost fluids. "Uraraka," the girl replied, dazed, before turning to throw up unexpectedly. "Well, that was stupid." "Impressive but stupid," said the voice, always concerned voice coming to the fore. When Izuku had finished his water, the sound of present mic announcing the end of the exam washing over him. A minute later another, much older voice followed. "You've all done well, leave it to me for now, kids, have a gummy." "Oh no, that's Shizenji, run kid. She's going to skin us," said the voice, as if Izuku was in any state to run, or even stand. The incredibly short elderly hero made her way over to the two exhausted teens in her relatively plain costume, which hadn't really changed much even since Aoi was alive, except that it was smaller to continue to fit her. "Dear me, what have you dears done to yourselves?" she asked in a kindly voice. "Oh, she doesn't know what we're like anymore, we're in the clear for now," sighed the voice, sounding relieved, as Izuku lifted his arms, showing reddened forearms. "Just some heat exhaustion and first-degree burns, Shizenji-sensei," said Izuku blearily, causing the older woman to blink. "I shouldn't have called her that. I should not have called her that." Izuku berated himself, adding, "I think she's suffering from quirk overuse as well," gesturing to Uraraka. Well, at least you know what you did to yourself, so I don't have to tell you. You shouldn't have used your quirk that much, Sonny. I'll heal the burns, but we'll have to keep the both of you for a little while to get some fluids in you," said the frowning heroine, planting a kiss on Izuku's cheek, nearly instantly healing the burns on his forearm and compounding his exhaustion. "And most of the students just call me Recovery Girl," she added as an afterthought, calling for some robots with a stretcher. Tashinori had thoroughly enjoyed being allowed to watch the practical exam for the most part. There were so many excellent hero eggs this year, it did his old heart good to see it. Most of them made an excellent showing of themselves to one extent or another, destroying the robots with their wits and quirks and, better yet, several going out of their way to help their fellows. Young Midoriya had drawn Tashinori's eye yet again. The boy had an excellent quirk and knew how to use it, destroying robots left and right without pause, except to rescue the other test takers. The fact that the boy had a fire quirk was rather causing Toshinori to rethink his assessment of what exactly he had thrown at the sludge villain during their second meeting, but he shrugged it off, no way to be sure, and none of the other heroes had seen anything suspicious. A few of the other examinees drew his eye, his quest for the perfect successor always on his mind, especially the dark-haired boy, who kept using his hardening quirk to protect the others from debris with his body, and the purple-haired one who seemed more intent on keeping the others safe than on actually destroying the robots, only destroying 3 during the whole exam. When the real test of resolve began, the 0-pointer, Toshinori wouldn't deny how what remained of his stomach dropped, seeing the rubble seemingly crush one of the examinees, but he relaxed when he saw that none of the others in the room had tensed. It must have been planned for. Most of the test takers fled, hoping to gain what points they could. A few, one explosive blonde for example, ignored the 0-pointer entirely, focusing entirely on gaining points. Young Midoriya pulled ahead of the pack again in his estimation here, turning to face to Robot when he heard someone in danger, or so he must have thought, and destroying the robot with a huge display of firepower, earning approving murmurs from the gathered teachers. Yes, he was a very good candidate indeed. So far only young Togata really compared among all the young eggs Toshinori had seen. It's been a fair few years since someone managed to destroy a 0-pointer like that. Very impressive, said Nedzu from Toshinori's right. Indeed, that was well done, agreed the number 1 hero, nodding. The week he had to wait for his letter from UA weren't especially stressful for Izuku, his general anxiety being swiftly and frequently quashed by the voice, which not only insisted that he had done fine, but frequently complained that he had definitely performed remarkably, especially when he had jumped in to help Uraraka. Not that Izuku thought he had done anything suspicious. He had done well, but still within acceptable bounds for someone with minimal training. He just hoped that him incapacitating himself wasn't held against him. Izuku came. It's here, said his mother, coming over with the letter, shaking him from his reverie, and nervously shaking slightly. Izuku had a good idea where he got the anxiety from. He took the letter and went to open it in his room, while his mother paced outside in worry. Opening the envelope, Izuku found not a piece of paper, but a small projector, which quickly started up. Okay, I don't know now Nedzu is doing this, but UA has too much funding, grumbled the voice. The projector began to display an image of a small white mammal of some sort, with a scarred face. It's me. The one who you don't know if it's a mouse, or a dog, or a bear, but regardless I'm the principal, and I have your exam results, came the squeaky voice of Nedzu himself, the only currently active hero in Japan with an intelligence-type quirk, and one of the beings the voice was most wary of, knowing next to nothing about him, his history, or how much he knew beyond that he had been the subject of some sort of experiment years prior, and seemed to be of a broadly heroic bent. First, the written test. You did extremely well, achieving not only the top score of all the applicants, but a near-perfect score as well, exclaimed the strange mammal gleefully. As for the practical exam, you scored 80 villain points, already more than enough to pass. But you see, there is a secondary scoring system, a pause, seemingly for effect, rescue points. The UA Department of Heroics looks for selflessness and the ability to help others. You not only stopped to help several of your fellow applicants, but injured yourself to save young Uraraka from the 0-pointer. The judges of the exam were deeply impressed by your deeds, awarding you 60 rescue points, giving you a total score of 140 points. This isn't just the top score of the year, but the top score of all time, edging out the previous record of 135 set by All Might himself. With this in mind, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to UA, Midoriya-kun. This is your Hero Academia. Finished the tiny principal at length, before the projector turned itself off. Don't draw attention to ourselves, just get the highest score of anyone there, and beat out All Might's own score while we're at it, said the voice, seemingly annoyed that they had gotten so many rescue points. It won't be a problem, we know nearly everything about All Might and even we didn't know about that record, reassured Izuku. Now let's go tell Mum the good news. To say the least, Bakugo was unhappy at being beat out for the top spot in the exam, especially by such a huge margin. He insisted on sparring with Izuku more often, and made it clear that Izuku shouldn't get comfortable, because he was still going to be the better hero. On the other hand, he seemed immensely pleased that Izuku had seemingly given his all for the exam, giving a smirk that would likely scare even children far less anxiety-prone than Izuku, and deciding to take credit for the change in attitude. Izuku took longer than he expected to get to UA owing to the crowds. He had intended to get there in plenty of time to find the classroom, and begin reading the Monday issue of Bi-Weekly Heroics that was now clutched to his chest as he stood just outside the door to Class 1A. "Now that's just an ostentatiously large door," said the voice as Izuku stared at the huge door to his class. "It might be for people with larger mutations or gigantification quirks. Okay, here goes. Hopefully our classmates will be nice, unlike the boy from the exam," thought the greenette, trying to relax himself, and pushing the door open. Immediately spotting the blue-haired boy engaged in an argument with Bakugo. "Get your feet off the desk. Don't you think that's disrespectful toward our seniors, and the people who made the desk?" said the taller boy, gesturing wildly. Izuku only noted a couple of other familiar faces in the class, but the boy with purple hair was thankfully there. "No, I don't. Which prissy middle school shoved that stick up your butt extra?" replied Bakugo with his usual tact. "Ahem, I went to Semi Academy. I'm Ida Tenya," said the bluette, seemingly realizing he hadn't introduced himself. "Semi, huh? An elite. I'm going to enjoy destroying you," sneered the blonde. "I know he's a bit rude, but that's a bit harsh, Kakin," thought Izuku, as Ida recoiled at the smirking boy's words. "Destroy me? And you wish to be a hero?" he cried, aghast, before seemingly noticing Izuku in the door and marching up to him. "Hello. I am Ida Dash," he began. "Why yeah, I heard, I am Midoriya Izuku, nice to meet you." Cut in Izuku, trying to stay somewhat polite, while the voice practically growled at the boy. "I must apologize, Midoriya-kun," said Ida, bowing. "I completely misjudged you. You divined the true intent of the exam. You are a better student than I." Izuku and the voice both blinked at that, surprised. Izuku tried to formulate a response. Ida was right, in that he had seen through the exam, but he didn't know that Izuku had such an unfair advantage. Meanwhile, the voice wondered that the boy they had taken for aggressive and confrontational had turned out to simply be incredibly awkward and earnest. Before they could formulate a response to this unexpected praise, they were interrupted by a voice from behind them. "Midoriya-kun. You got in. I'm glad we're in the same class." Izuku turned, to see that the girl from the exam, Uraraka, was the one speaking. "Ah, Uraraka-san, you got in too, well done," said the boy, before the voice noticed movement on the floor behind her. Looking down to see what it was, they were surprised to see a dark-haired man in a yellow sleeping bag on the floor for some reason. They became even more surprised when they figured out who the sleep-deprived man was. "Eraserhead," squeaked the greenette, overcome by his surprise at seeing such a capable underground hero in such a strange position. "That's Aizawa-sensei to you, kid," said the hero, blinking and briefly glancing at the magazine which Izuku still held, before looking back to his face and standing, "and you should go to your desk." Izuku and his shocked classmates did as instructed, as the little-known pro stepped out of the sleeping bag, revealing dark clothes and a gray scarf capture weapon. "He spotted me quickly enough, but it still took you far too long to quiet. We don't have time to waste here. Now," he said, pulling out a blue and white gym uniform from the sleeping bag. "Put these on, and head to the PE grounds." Izuku subtly watched to see the standard for physique in the other heroic students, and found a fair spectrum among the boys, from the incredibly slim purple-haired kid, to the better-built like Bakugo, and the kid with hair oddly split down the middle. Surprisingly, two of the boys, the one with many arms and the one with large lips, had even better physiques than Izuku despite him effectively having 6 personal trainers for his entire life. Some sort of mutation on the kid with the mask, and probably a strength quirk of some sort with the other, put in the voice, also trying to track the standard for UA students. As Izuku made to leave the changing room, they'll probably both be pretty tough opponents in close quarter, same with the split-haired kid. "I can't wait to see what everyone's quirks are, especially the kid with the bird head. That's an interesting mutation," said Izuku on his way out, fascinated as always with new quirks. A quirk apprehension test? But what about the entrance ceremony? Asked Uraraka once Aizawa-sensei had announced what they would be doing when everyone finally arrived at the pish. The teachers can choose not to go if they want. If you want to become heroes before you graduate, you have no time for such time wasting. You all went through physical tests in middle school, but you were barred from using your quirks. That's completely illogical. Before anything else, we need a baseline of what you can do. Midoriya, you came first in the exam. What was your best softball pitch in middle school? Did he really have to bring that up? It was 71 meters, kid, said the voice, knowing Izuku never cared enough to note the figures. 71 meters, sensei, answered the short boy. The tired-looking hero tossed a softball in Izuku's direction, which he snatched from the air. Try it with your quirk. Do whatever you want, just stay in the circle, he said, pulling out a recording device. Izuku considered how best to launch a ball using his quirk without destroying it on his way to the painted circle. That should work, he thought, generating a dense ball of flames the color of tarnished bronze, as cold as he could make them, but incredibly dense. This was going to be fiddly. First, Izuku placed the ball in the cooler flames and applied an odd downward swirl to the fire, preventing the ball from falling through the flames as they constantly moved down as it sank. Then he transferred the ball back to his right and threw it, creating a large burst of much hotter golden flames as it left his hand. As the ball flew at high speed from his hand, he continued to use his quirk to accelerate the darker flames around the ball to make it go further until they dissipated. The teacher held up the device, which read 852.6 m. This is a much more rational metric to judge your potential. Whoa, over 800 meters, that's awesome, said one of the other students, and most of the crowd seemed to agree. This is going to be so fun. The voice noted the way Eraserhead's expression shifted and thought that whoever said that really shouldn't have. Fun? Do you think becoming a hero is a game? In that case, how about a new rule? Whoever comes last over all 8 tests will be expelled, said the dark-haired man. He's either bluffing to get us motivated, or he's serious and there's more to the tests than he's letting on, reasoned the voice. Eraserhead of all people knew pure physical ability wasn't a good metric of potential. Either way, we should keep quiet unless he does try to expel someone without giving them a proper chance. Izuku did fairly well at most of the tests, not really able to use his quirk to improve grip strength, at least not unless the tester was extremely resilient, or side jumps, but able to slightly improve his times for things like the long jump and 50-meter dash. Regardless of whether he could use his quirk well for a test, he still gave a good showing of himself. The voice's belief in the importance of improving the body as well as the quirk was well-founded. Between the tests, Izuku tried to watch each of his classmates to see their quirks, while the voice watched to see if any novel techniques could be adapted for their use. Not likely in most cases, but you never knew. Izuku was especially enamored of the strange shadow thing that the bird-headed kid Tokoyami, he said his name was able to produce, and the ice the split-haired kid Todoroki generated to pass the tests. His name is Todoroki, like Endeavor, but his quirk is ice? It must be from his mother. Or it could be a mutation, said the voice before adding, but you're right, Endeavor married someone with an ice quirk a few years before you were born. It was pretty big news. Do you think if he overuses it he'll develop hypothermia, like we get heat exhaustion? Or will it be a dehydration-type backlash? Asked Izuku, curious. With cryogenesis it is normally hypothermia, said the voice, Hayato leading the thought, but I'm more curious about how he's melting it. He must have a dual quirk, maybe divided by side? Just then a girl with pink skin and black eyes started her 50-meter dash attempt, causing Izuku and the voice to both shut up, stupefied. The girl was skating on the liquid her quirk produced. Dash, why did we never think of that? Exclaimed the voice incredulously. I really want to try that. Do you think our fire is solid enough to let us? Asked the boy, ignoring the voice's shock. Probably, it depends how it actually works. If it does work we'd need fireproof shoes, like without costume. But let's leave practicing that to the dream, okay? Answered the voice, while it tried to figure out exactly how to adapt that ability to a non-liquid like their fire. Resisting the urge to pester the pink-skinned girl about what her quirk did exactly, Izuku walked over to the purple-haired insomniac, who was beginning to look increasingly worried. "Why you okay, man?" he asked. "Just embarrassing myself in front of my favorite hero, and about to get expelled on my first day, but other than that fine," said the slender boy bitterly. Izuku blinked at the knowledge that Eraserhead was anyone's favorite hero despite his efforts to remain unknown. Assuming that the boy hadn't noticed that All Might was watching, no one else seemed to have. "And how do you think Eraserhead would do on these tests?" Izuku asked, trying to be encouraging. He added, "His quirk would be no help at all here, and you're clearly trying pretty hard. I'm sure he can see that. Anyway, I wanted to ask what your name was." "I'm Midoriya." "Oh, Shinso." But he sounded pretty serious about the expulsion. "Thanks, by the way," Shinso said, beginning to mumble, "for helping me with the entrance exam." "And no problem, but he probably only expels people if he thinks they aren't worth his time, and he knows better than to underestimate non-physical quirks, assuming you have a quirk like that, since I haven't seen you use it all day and with how worried you were Izuku began to mumble, blushing at the thanks, before cutting off when Shinsu's face darkened at mention of his quirk. Anyway, nice to meet you Shinsu-kun, let's talk after." In the end Izuku came in second, only behind Yaoyorozu, but the black-haired girl was using a motorcycle for the running tests, and used a vice to destroy the grip tester, so he was pretty happy with second. Bakugo came fourth, behind Todoroki, to his visible fury. The pink-skinned girl, Ashido, came in 10th, just ahead of Uraraka. Shinso hadn't actually come in last, barely edging out a girl called Hagakure, whose quirk apparently made them invisible. Shota held in a groan as this year's batch of brats finished the last of the tests he had set. They were going to be a handful, he could see it already. He should just expel all of them and focus on his own work this year. He would have done it if they hadn't had a lot of potential for the most part. "Here are your results," he said, pressing a button, and causing a projection to appear beside him. "You can look over how you did before you head back to class to collect your curriculum sheets." "Oh, and I was lying about the expulsion thing. It was just a logical ruse to get you to do your best." Hagakure had a good bit of potential, he could see that from her quirk, and the way she kept at it despite being unable to use it in the tests. Aizawa carefully noted the reactions of the various students, seeing which of them had believed him, and which not. The students began to head back to the building in vague clumps. Now then, time to talk to the idiot who seemed to think he was being discreet when he was 7 feet tall, and wearing a mustard-colored suit. "Not very busy, All Might?" asked Shota, scathing. "A logical ruse, Aizawa-kun? We both know that's not true. You expelled an entire class last year, why did you expel no one today?" boomed the infernally jovial man. "None of them had zero potential. If that changes, I'll get rid of them. Stopping the kids from getting themselves killed trying to be heroes is a kindness. But surely you didn't come to see how many I would expel?" answered the younger hero in a grumble. Well, I just wanted to get a look at the students and where they are with their quirks before my first lesson tomorrow." Now that sounded like sense, so, given who had said it, Shota immediately discounted it as lies. Whatever the buffoon wanted, it wasn't that. "Sure. Good idea, hope you learned something useful." He groaned, waving the hero off and walking by. As he walked by the powerful hero, Shota was already compiling his yearly list of things that needed improving and possible red flags that would need to be looked into. It was unreasonably densely packed this year. Shinso was simple enough, just make sure he stopped relying on his quirks so much, same with Hagakure, but apart from Yaoyorozu the top 4 of today's tests were looking to be a trial. Bakugo was aggressive and loud, snarling at anyone who tried to talk to him. Shota would almost certainly have to force him to learn to work in a team. Todoroki was withdrawn, possibly having the same problem, but the bigger red flag was the fire. Or rather the lack of fire. Thinking about the scar, he decided it was probably some sort of fear or wariness, not that uncommon with quirks that destructive, brought on by some sort of accident. If Todoroki wanted to achieve his potential as a hero, he would have to get over that, but it was too early by far for Shota to push for that. The kid clearly knew what he was doing with his ice at least. Not self-trained, that was obvious, but it made sense. unlike with Midoriya. In Todoroki's case, he would have been able to get all the training he asked for. His father was a high-ranking hero after all. But Midoriya had no heroes in his immediate family from his file, but he was still clearly not self-taught. A quirk-licensed dojo or gym was a possibility, but such places were both rare and expensive. The kid's father was out of the picture, only one emergency contact in his mother, who was a nurse. No, Midoriya definitely couldn't afford to get training that way. Which left the question of who had trained him. And that was just one of the red flags clustered around the golden-eyed kid. Shota's mind kept coming back to when the boy had spotted him. He had been recognized almost instantly. That was weird. Weirder still was the magazine that the kid was holding. Bi-Weekly Heroics was a strange publication. The analysis was mediocre, but a few heroes in training still read it, usually those whose own analysis fell short. It did, however, have its audience among pros. Not many heroes knew about the codes, and those that did tended to be careful about who they told. The publication was, from a certain point of view, suspicious. It published a great deal of information that could be useful to heroes and villains alike, and it was almost impossible to find out where they got it from or who put it there. Just last week it had been the first source that leaked the fact that All Might would be teaching at UA this year. If Midoriya, as Shota was beginning to strongly suspect, was a reader, that would be a massive red flag with blinking neon lights on it. Either way, he thought, making his way to the staff room, I need to keep an eye on that one. As Hitoshi was walking away from the building after his mixed first day, a disastrous set of tests, but Eraserhead as his teacher, and he wasn't actually expelled, he heard a voice call from behind him, "Hey Shinso, wait up." When he turned, he saw Midoriya jogging towards him, the girl who launched a ball into space, and the boy who topped most of the speed-related tests following behind. "You're way too tall. Just wanted to apologize for earlier. I shouldn't have started talking about your quirk L like that." That wasn't what he was expecting. He's not mad that I started glaring at him, thought the insomniac, blinking as the other two greeted him. It's fine, I just dash. He's going to find out soon enough anyway. Goodbye, friendship. My quirk is brainwashing, Hitoshi said, waiting for the stammering boy to recoil, to call him a villain. Wow, that's so cool, said the green-haired boy, stars in his eyes. You could be so good at villain capture and hostage situations. How does it work? What can you dash? The greenette began rambling. You don't think it's a villain's quirk? Hitoshi blurted. No, why would I? Did you know a V-villain with the same Chu quirk? Asked Midoriya, seeming confused. No, but dash. Then it's not a villain's quirk. Cut in Midoriya, firm. But I could control you right now. And by the time you did, All Might could have destroyed an entire street. It's dumb to judge people on what they could do. The golden-eyed teen asserted, stammer vanishing. Hitoshi just stared, uncomprehending, until the blue-haired boy added, indeed, while making strange, rigid hand gestures and nodding. Judging someone on their quirk would be unfitting of students of a prestigious institution like UA. You should inform a member of staff if other students accuse you of villainy without cause. Yeah, said the brunette, as Hitoshi tried not to cry. Your quirk sounds pretty useful, Shinsuke-kun, and you're in the hero course anyway. I'm Uraraka, by the way. And I'm Ida Tenya, said the robotic boy, seemingly forgetting how loudly he had introduced himself that morning. Now we should leave before we miss our trains. In the dream, Izuku stood in a version of Tokyo Bay. He had removed all the ships, and then coated the entire surface of the water with a foot of ice with a thought all the way to the horizon. Have I ever mentioned how much I love being able to do things like that? He asked Yugo, turning to look at him with a grin. Yes, nearly every time we dream outside, replied Yugo in an exasperated tone, as Izuku began to make it snow beneath the clear blue sky for no reason. Come on, he said, manifesting a pair of skates on his feet. You're going to need to practice if you want to use that new move. Yeah, said Izuku, manifesting his own skates, and immediately falling over. The pieces of the voice laughed as they made their way to different parts of the bay, beginning their own nocturnal endeavors, while only Yugo, who was the only one who actually knew how to skate in life, stayed with Izuku. The next hour consisted of an increasingly frustrating series of falls, as Izuku tried to get the hang of the basics of skating, Not a simple task given how frequently he fell in normal shoes. Whenever he looked over, Ren was looking over text that looked to have come from bi-weekly heroics but was now hovering in midair. Ishigo and Dai were practicing to see how best to adapt Mina's acid skates, melting pieces of the ice as they glided along, and looking at a memory of her for reference occasionally, while Aoi and Hayato were reviewing the quirks and other abilities of their classmates. Hayato kept fixating on Tokoyami's quirk for some reason. Overall, Izuku dearly wished he were part of one of the other groups as he fell over again. Yugo was apparently not oblivious to his desire to join the others. Go on then, you've made some progress, kid. Why don't you go join Hayato and Aoi before you get some real sleep? We'll get some more practice tomorrow, said the man, tousling the green mop on Izuku's head. Izuku gave a whoop, dematerializing the skates, and ran towards the two, and the various memories being manifested around them over some snow he made to avoid another fall. The next day was a relatively uneventful day of school, not too different from middle school, except that he had a new set of names to try to remember, and that he kept getting distracted by the fact that all of their teachers were pro-heroes. The voice informed him that asking for autographs after class would not in fact be a good idea. At lunch, people seemed to sit mostly in their vague friendship groups that had already begun to form, Izuku with Uraraka, Ida, and Shinso. The voice began to laugh openly when it spotted Bakugo being dragged forcefully to a table with Mina. She insisted on her first name, a boy with strange elbows named Siro, and the other kid in 1A with golden eyes, Kaminari, by a grinning redhead, who ignored his angry protests. Man, that Kirishima kid must be brave or stupid. Maybe both. Haha, hopefully he'll be good for Blasty, might get him to calm down. Well, he does have a quirk that lets him tank the explosions, replied Izuku, grinning. Huh, do you think he's using it to keep his hair like that? This prompted a sputtering laugh from Izuku. What's funny? Asked Shinso. Sorry, I was just thinking if Kirishima-kun was using his quirk to keep his hair up like that, answered Izuku, earning a laugh from Shinso and Uraraka, and some mild chastisement from Ida, who failed to prevent his own small smile about respecting his fellow students. Izuku let the ensuing conversation wash over him, occasionally interjecting an opinion, thinking that he was really glad he had been able to come here. The people were so nice. After lunch was foundational heroics, the class Izuku had been looking forward to, and the voice had been slightly dreading. Ever since they had learned that All Might was going to be teaching at UA, they were sure this was what he would be teaching. I am here, coming through the door, like a normal person, cried All Might, coming through the door in a bizarre, theatrical manner. Sure enough, he was the teacher. The voice, having been forewarned, didn't break this time, but it noticeably stiffened, beginning to watch everything All Might did, as well as everything Izuku did like an overprotective hawk. Toshinori may be a bit of a dope, but his instincts are good enough to earn him that #1 spot. We need to be careful not to do anything to make him suspicious, warned the voice, while the rest of the class exclaimed about how cool it was to be taught by All Might. Izuku agreed, but he did worry about how much it seemed to stress the voice. It had already gone silent again, and resumed its tense vigil. This is foundational heroics, boomed All Might, making his way to the podium boldly. In this class we'll be teaching you the basics of heroing through various trials. Today we'll be starting with this. He held up a card, the word battle on it, the trial of battle. All Might pushed a button he retrieved from behind the podium. And to go with your first battle as heroes in training, here are your costumes. 20 cases emerged from the wall of the classroom. Now, everyone get changed and head to ground beta. Izuku had been really happy with the design he had settled on for his costume. He, his mum, and the voice had worked on it together, and when he got it out of the case he was ecstatic to see how well the support company had brought it to life. So, naturally, the first thing he did was try to set various pieces of it on fire, and grinned widely when not only did it not catch, but the material failed to warm significantly on the inside. The costume Izuku had designed consisted mostly of a forest green jumpsuit, with charcoal gray flame-shaped highlights on the arms and chest, and, Izuku's favorite aesthetic addition, a pattern of feathered wings in various shades of gray covering most of the back. The voice had been against the bird-like addition, saying we do not want to cause people to draw the phoenix comparison. But Izuku ignored it. He loved the wings, and he only conceded to not make them red. In addition to the main body of the suit, he had asked for a few simple accessories: fireproof shoes and long gloves in red and charcoal gray respectively, a belt with several pouches, also fireproof, and a coil of fireproof paracord attached, a mask that could be pulled over his lower face to deal with smoke or gas, and, most importantly, a compact cooling system to try to keep his core temperature at an acceptable level. When Izuku finally got everything on, and feeling comfortable and secure enough, he went out to join the others at the entrance of Ground Beta. When he got out, Uraraka approached him, wearing a pink and black space-themed costume, which was skin-tight for some reason. "Wait, are those heels?" asked the voice. "But, wow, Midoriya-kun, your costume's so cool. Really practical. I really should have been more specific with my application, it turned out a bit embarrassing." Interrupted Uraraka, rubbing the back of her head. I really like the SP space theme. But if why you don't like it, you see could Pierre probably ask them to change it. Sensei. Oh, so the kid in full armor was Ida apparently. This is the same fake city as the entrance exam. Does that mean we will be doing something similar today? No, Ida Shounen, will be going 2 steps more advanced. Today will be the indoor battle trial. Most villain fights you see on TV take place in the street, but in actuality the majority of villains work indoors. The smarter villains always hide in the shadows. So today we will be doing 2-man team battles indoors, villains versus heroes. Explained the enormous hero loudly. Well, he has a point there, but isn't this a bit complex for a first lesson? Asked the voice as the other members of the class began to talk over one another. How are we determining victory? How badly can we hurt the other team? Are you going to threaten to expel people? How will we determine teams? Isn't my cape fabulous? Don't talk all at once, said the number 1 hero, pulling out a sheet of paper, beginning to explain the details of the exercise, while the voice laughed at him for needing a cheat sheet. Apparently the scenario was that the villains had a nuclear device hidden somewhere in the building, and the heroes had to either capture the villains, or retrieve the weapon, while the villains had to try to capture the heroes or wait out the clock. The teams would seemingly be decided by lots. Is that really the best way to choose teams? Asked Ida. Think about it, a lot of the time heroes have to work with whoever happens to be nearby, so most hero teams are impromptu like that, answered Izuku before All Might could speak. I see. I apologize for my interruption, said Ida, bowing. The lots were drawn, and the teams decided on. Team A, Uraraka and Midoriya. Team B, Shoji and Todoroki. Team C, Shinso and Yaoyorozu. Team D, Biguanida. Team E, Mina and Aoyama. Team F, Koda and Sato. Team G, Kaminari and Jiro. Team H, Tokoyami and Azui. Team I, Ojiro and Hagakure. Team J, Siro and Kirishima. Well, those are some interesting pairings. We wouldn't want to be Ida right now, or whoever has to go up against Team B, commented the voice, noting that Team B had both an information-gathering powerhouse and a regular powerhouse. The first 2 teams to fight will be, said All Might, drawing 2 more ball from 2 boxes, Team A as heroes and Team D as villains. And we're up against Kaken, great, thought Izuku, sarcastically, as he looked over to where Bakugo and Ida stood. Think on the bright side. He may be a powerhouse, but he's a powerhouse, you know. You could have ended up with Team B or H, consoled the voice. The villain team will have 5 minutes to hide the weapon and prepare, said All Might, leading the teams that would be fighting to a nearby building. Then the heroes will enter, and have 15 minutes to try to best the villains. We'll be watching from the observation room, and I will stop the fight if it goes too far. As All Might turned away toward the observation room, Bakugo came up to Izuku, saying, "You had better even take me seriously this time, Deku." Before storming off, entering the building with Ida. There is no way that kid is going to stay by the weapon, even if it is the strategically sound thing to do. You should try to find a way to avoid him while you find it, said the voice. So, we should probably plan what we're going to do. I know your quirk is some sort of gravity manipulation. Do you mind telling me how it works? I can negate the gravity of anything I touch with 5 or more of the pads on my fingers, but it makes me nauseous if I use it too much. Wow, that's pretty useful. Can you use it on yourself, and can you reduce gravity, or can you only negate it? Negating only, and it does work on me, but that makes me really nauseous, replied Uraraka, grimacing. Okay, my quirk's pretty simple, I can make these flames. Izuku held up a hand with a candle-like flame on one finger, but only within a couple of inches of my body, though I can move them wherever once I make them. They're really hot, so I need to be careful around people. Try to come in from somewhere unexpected, anti-gravity could let you in on an upper floor. Advised the voice. Kaken is probably going to come looking for us, he wouldn't hide out with the weapon. We should try to avoid him. I can climb walls with my quirk, but it would be easier with your quirk. Could let rope down for you if you got me to the roof. Yeah, I can do that, but what makes you think Bakugo will look for us? Wouldn't Ida be better for that? Asked Uraraka, confused. He is, but Kaken is really competitive, and he probably won't listen to Ida if he tells him to stay, so Ida will have to. Prep. Time's up. Heroes, enter the building. Came the voice of All Might over their earpieces. Okay, let's head up, said Izuku, walking to the wall. Uraraka put a palm on Izuku's shoulder, and he started to float up from the ground slightly. Izuku used his fire to make handholds to quickly claw his way up the wall. Okay, let me go, he said once he reached the top. When gravity came back, and he landed firmly on the roof of the 5-story building, Izuku quickly took out the paracord and tied it to a nearby piece of railing, checked it was secure, then dropped it off the side. In under 2 minutes both heroes had reached the top of the building without the villains noticing. Izuku swiftly began to form dense flames in his hands as they entered through a door on the rooftop, and went down the stairs into the building. The heroes got very lucky. Apparently the villains hadn't anticipated a rooftop entry, and so the bomb was placed in a room on the 5th floor. In the short time it took them to find it, Izuku had only formed 4 full fireballs, which now orbited above his head like strange cageless lanterns to keep his hands empty. Ida stood, looking away from them, in the spotless room. Clever, he got rid of anything Uraraka could use. We should have gotten her to bring some ammunition along, said the voice, as Izuku held out an arm to quietly stop Uraraka. Izuku motioned forward 2 of the flames, letting them expand slightly in preparation to encircle Ida, capturing him. Ida, however, stymied this plan by beginning a villainous monologue to himself in a room he thought was empty. Well, at least he's getting into the role, laughed the voice, while Uraraka tried in vain to cover her own laugh. Ida spun at the noise, noticing the heroes. Bakugo, the heroes are here, Ida said into his earpiece, before continuing. You may have gotten past my partner in crime, heroes, but you will not be able to pull any tricks now. I have removed everything you could use from this room. We should try to finish this before Bakugo arrives, but he's too fast for us to get past. Uraraka, try to get the bomb, I'll deal with Ida, said Izuku, launching one of the fireballs at Ida. His armor will protect him from serious damage, and sending 2 more off to either side, still above head height, then began to form 2 more. Uraraka ran towards the bomb as the fires moved. Izuku had expected to be able to use one of the 3 fireballs for a wall to separate Ida from the bomb. It shouldn't matter which way he dodged. However, Ida thwarted him by simply running back to the bomb, and picking it up, then running with it out of reach, left of the first shot. This is going to be a pain. You're going to have to try to limit his movements without hindering Uraraka-chan, warned the voice. Realizing that the wall plan wasn't going to work, Izuku moved 2 of the moving flames to the right side of the room and formed a huge wall, effectively rendering half the room inaccessible, and the third backwards to the door, hopefully preventing Bakugo from getting in. Keep going, he'll have a tough time in confined spaces. The room began to grow uncomfortably warm as Izuku moved the 2 new flames to block off more escape routes from Ida, and rushed after Uraraka. Ida, who was understandably unwilling to enter close combat with Uraraka, finally put down the bomb, realizing he wouldn't have space to run much longer, and moved to hold them off. Uraraka turned to run around him, while Izuku simply moved the nearest wall into his way, forcing him to halt. Once the speed quirk user had briefly halted, Izuku swiftly turned the wall into a ring, finally catching their opponent, as Uraraka ran, giving the fire circle a wide berth to the bomb. At this point the wall to Izuku's left exploded inward. Bakugo took one look at the hell-like room, and immediately launched himself at the greenette, explosions flaring. "Right hook," said the voice. Bakugo did start with an explosion in his right hand, but rather than an attack, it was a smokescreen and a way of redirecting himself behind the shorter boy. Sheet dash, another explosion came from behind him before he could counteract it, the force knocking him to the rubble-strewn ground just before All Might announced, "Hero team wins." Bakugo's head whipped around, spotting Uraraka with her palm against the bomb, his eyes widening, as Ida did a good dramatic Izuku struggled to sit up. "That is going to bruise," he thought, dissipating the various fires in the room, revealing the melted sections and scorch marks. "Well, at least you doesn't seem to have broken anything." "You sneaky sheet, Deku, how the f did you get past me?" ground out the ashen blonde. WEC came in by the R-roof kaken. "Ich don't you FING count this as a win. I would have destroyed you if you fought straight, shitty coward. Come back to the observation room teams, we need to review the match," called All Might. When the four made it back to the observation room, the rest of their classmates began clamoring to compliment them on their fight, before All Might managed to quiet them. "Now who can tell me who the MVP of this first match was?" asked the teacher. "Midoriya-kun," said Yoros. "And can you tell me why?" "Yes, sensei, the other three performed admirably. Ida did an excellent job, both getting into his role as the villain and protecting the bomb until he became boxed in. Uraraka was instrumental in retrieving the bomb and in letting the heroes evade Bakugo. Bakugo didn't initially perform well as part of a team, but rushed back to aid his teammate immediately. But in the end, Midoriya devised both the plan to get the heroes past Bakugo and the strategy to limit Ida's speed, and carried them out well," answered Yaoyorozu at length. "Well, she's certainly thorough in her explanations," commented the voice. "That's exactly right," said All Might. "But Midoriya Shounen and Bakugo Shounen should also have done more to limit the damage to the building. It isn't wise as a villain, or as a hero, to damage your base too much. Let's begin the next match, shall we?" he added, seeming to regain his poise. The next fight was between Team B as the heroes and Team I as the villains. It was as one-sided and quick as the voice predicted. Shoji located the heroes as soon as they entered, and Todoroki just froze the entire building before walking past the trapped heroes and grabbing the weapon within 3 minutes. "That was amazing, never mind the power, Todoroki-kun has some serious control. He must have gotten some serious training from Endeavor." The next few fights were much more uneventful and somewhat better balanced, though both Team C and Team J got extremely lucky to be the villains. When all the fights were over, All Might complimented them on the lack of any serious injuries, then told them to head back to the classroom, before making his heroic exit, leaving at high speed. The day after his mediocre performance in the battle trial, Tenya arrived at his desk slightly late, only 15 minutes before the bell rang, as a result of stopping to politely answer the questions of the reporters about the quality of education at UA, and watched with some disappointment as each of the other students came in. They were not technically late, so he didn't say anything, but he worried. For some of them, any sort of delay might have meant that they missed the beginning of the lesson. Especially Shinso, who came in looking half dead 3 minutes before the bell. Tenya wondered if it would be the heroic thing to do to suggest that he try to get more sleep. But if it is a medical condition, that would be highly insensitive. It might even be related to his quirk. Maybe I should ask Tensei what to do. A few moments before the bell, Aizawa-sensei rolled into the room in his customary sleeping bag, prompting Tenya to once again wonder how the teacher could stand the heat, especially with the addition of the scarf, before emerging from it to take a place behind the desk at the front of the class. "I have handouts with more detailed evaluation of your performances during the battle trial. You should look over them later, but a few points of note," said the perpetually exhausted seeming man, passing a stack of sheets to Aoyama, before continuing. "Bakugo, stop acting like a child, you are wasting your talents by not working with your team." Midoriya, the greenette snapped to attention, coming back from wherever he had been a moment earlier. You can't just set fire to buildings like that, and you need to be more careful of your teammates. If Uraraka had tried to keep going towards Ida, she would have run into that firewall. Yes, sir, it won't happen again. Tenya's friend mumbled, staring intently at his desk and blushing. Clearly he took the dangers of his fire pretty seriously. See that it doesn't. Now onto some important homeroom business. You need to pick a class president. That was surprisingly normal given the intensity of UA so far. But Tenya admitted that tea was something he had been expecting to come up soon. At their teacher statement, most of Tenya's classmates began to loudly claim that they should be picked for the position, citing leadership qualities, or a mere desire to fill the role. The only real exceptions were Shoji, Tokoyami, Todoroki, and Midoriya, who had spaced out again. Tenya needed to talk to the boy about that. He was going to miss important lessons if this continued. After a minute of this, Tenya couldn't take their lax attitude anymore. The position of class president is an important one. Just because you want it doesn't make you qualified. A class president has to have the trust of their class, so it should be decided democratically. Then, realizing that he had technically spoken out of turn himself, he asked, "Is that all right, sensei? As long as you decide on the president by the end of homeroom," replied their teacher, getting back into his sleeping bag. "Thank you. Given how little we know each other, won't everyone just vote for themselves?" asked Azui. "Yes, but that's how we'll know that anyone who receives multiple votes will be appropriate for the role." It made sense. It took impressive leadership to build that level of trust in just a couple of days. In the end, despite his odd habit of not seeming to pay attention in class, Midoriya had shown ample leadership and judgment between the exam and the battle trial. So that was where Tenya cast his own vote. He was not the only one, since alongside Yaoyorozu and Tenya, Izuku was one of the only 3 to receive multiple votes, getting 3. So Midoriya will be class president dash. "I resign," said the greenette firmly, almost the instant the words were out of the dark-haired man's mouth, to Tenya's astonishment. Why? And how could he interrupt Aizawa-sensei like that? Thought the blue-haired teen, scandalized. Aizawa looked hard at the greenette for several seconds, neither black nor gold eyes looking away. The teacher sighed. "Okay, in that case, since both Yaoyorozu and Ida have 2 votes, we'll hold a second vote to determine which will be class president at the end of the day." Dismissed. When Tenya had gotten his lunch, he sat down at the table that Midoriya, Uraraka, and Shinso were already occupying. "Lunch rush's food is the best, right guys?" asked the greenette. "That it is, as expected of UA, as well as a hero such as Lunch Rush," Tenya answered, while Shinso grunted, and Uraraka nodded enthusiastically. Tenya was about to broach the subject of the resignation, but Uraraka forestalled him. "This rice is the best. And this is some great katsudon," replied Midoriya, prompting a brief aside about the table's favorite foods. "Midoriya-kun," said Tenya, when he was sure there was a gap in the conversation for him to talk into, "why would you resign from the post of class president? Do you not trust your judgment? And don't you think it was rude to talk over Aizawa-sensei like that?" "Oh, Midoriya began to stammer and press his forefingers together, not looking at him, all earlier intensity gone. "I just didn't want to be class president, and I don't think I'm the best choice." "Nonsense," assured Tenya in his best reassuring voice. "You have consistently shown excellent judgment and bravery. That was why I voted for you. But if you don't wish to perform the duty, that is understandable." Midoriya flinched slightly at the loud noise, and Shinso narrowed his eyes. "Why you voted for me? I'm sorry to make why you waste your vote like that. Don't concern yourself, I should have checked with your wishes, rather than assumed you would want the position." Honestly, Tenya felt bad for helping to force his friend to make a scene like that. Just then, a loud alarm sounded. Midoriya shot to his feet instantly, then a voice sounded from the school speakers. "Level 3 security breach, please evacuate promptly." "What's a level 3 breach?" asked Tenya, as Midoriya was pulling Shinso from his seat. "Intruders in the grounds," said Izuku over his shoulder, as he dragged the insomniac ahead of the ensuing stampede. Tenya and Uraraka had to go around the table, and so swiftly fell behind, and were caught in the crowd, which pushed him against the window. Outside, a large crowd of reporters with camera crews were advancing towards the school. The press? Ida tried to tell the others around him that it was fine, but they couldn't hear him over the noise. This was dangerous. Someone could be trampled. Tenya needed to get everyone to calm down, but Uraraka, make me float. He called to the nearby girl, who did so with difficulty, reaching over the people between them. Weightless, Tenya was able to rise above the heads of the others and use his quirk to advance to the exit swiftly, spinning, but that couldn't be helped. His side slammed into the wall above the exit, and he yelled to get everyone's attention. It's just the press. There is no reason to panic. We should behave like students of UA should. Unsurprisingly, in Izuku's opinion, given the performance he had heard from behind him, Tenya ended up being elected class president in the runoff election, Yaoyorozu taking up the vice president position. Now then, let's see how they managed to get in, said the voice as the bell rang, releasing them for the day. Izuku left the building with his friends, and stared as the gate, where the gate used to be, came into sight. The middle of the gate was just gone. 2 feet of steel. The cleaning robots had clearly been at work here, but the rough edges of the gate and the red tint of the surrounding floor were still clear. Rust? Some sort of metallic weathering quirk, wondered Izuku, as he and his friends stared at the hole. The press didn't do this. No one in the press would be crazy enough for this. And that's a pretty powerful quirk, if it did this much before the alarm went off. A villain? But why? A message or a warning? Said the voice, darkly. Either way, we need to find out more. After the group had passed the door, and were on their way to the train station, he pulled out his phone, and found a contact listed as Gi-chan, sending a message. I was thinking of going clothes shopping later, if you're free? Who you texting? Asked Uraraka. Just a friend from middle school. Technically true in that he had first met Izuku in the first year of middle school, though friend was stretching it a bit. Sounds fun. Want to meet at the same place as usual? Came the reply from King. Sure. Jiren wanted to meet at 6. Thank God it was summer, so the sun was still up, otherwise Izuku's mother might have objected to meeting a friend from school at this hour. After leaving home, Vigilante get up in his bag. At 5:30 Izuku quickly walked to the office Jiren was currently using for meetings, changing on the way. Remember, we can't let him think that the UA gate is the main reason we came. Warned the voice, as Izuku entered the typically muggy office of the heavy-smoking info broker. Nice to see you again, Amber, said the smoking man, disingenuously, or so the voice guessed. Do you want a seat? You mentioned clothes shopping. Izuku didn't sit. Yes. And some info if you've got it. I need some shoes to go with the gloves I got a while back. Fireproof and nondescript. Size 8. Jiren frowned at Izuku's typical cutting straight to the point. The voice was sure he hated these meetings nearly as much as they did, for all that Izuku was a valuable client. I should be able to get you something, but it'll probably take about a week, and it'll need to be custom made. Is it all right if I set a price once I talk to my supplier? And the information? You know I do good prices for information. That's fine. I need a few updates. First off, any news on Trigger cases? Nothing new on Trigger, it's not getting into the country right now. Any possible Stain incidents? Jiren grinned. That I do have news on. Izuku very forcefully didn't show his surprise. Stain hadn't made any clear attacks since Izuku's first attempt to take him down. He seemed to continue with his mission to take down fake heroes, but there was no way to prove who was taking the heroes down. A hero got taken out in Hokkaido, Monday evening. Stain finally came out of hiding. Left a message. Izuku could imagine how grisly that message had been, and felt a resurgence of guilt for not taking the maniac down. Looks like the fright we gave him has finally worn off. Either that or he couldn't stand the lack of attention any longer. Trying to get off the subject of his failure, Izuku finally got to the real reason he was here. Do you know anything about the media break-in at UA this morning? No. Izuku knew that his gaze could be intimidating sometimes, probably something to do with being looked at by 7 people, and he directed a look at Jiren. Is that, no you don't know, or, No, you won't sell out a client? Jiren, predictably, neither answered, nor gave any hint with his facial expression which it was. All right, let me know when you have a price for me. When Izuku had finished his traditional session of hyperventilating in a bathroom, he began to walk home, looking like himself again. He knows, there's no way he doesn't, argued the voice, mostly Ishigo. It doesn't matter. If he was going to learn anything he would have by now. So we need to go elsewhere, said the voice, shifting toward Ren. But where? Jiren's our best source other than the network. I'm afraid we'll have to wait and see if the network puts out anything. You are way too young for interrogation. Let's focus on Ishiyama for now. All for One had had his hand in many cookie jars, but by far his most egregious endeavor was his constant quest for quirks, either to buy favors or for his personal hoard. But as normal began to change and people no longer went to him hoping he would take their quirks, he could no longer acquire them as cleanly and easily as before. So, to avoid the attention that a large number of people suddenly losing their quirks would bring, he began to employ people like Ishiyama. In the grand scheme of things, Ishiyama was a pawn. A minor piece of AFO's empire. Unlike his predecessor, he knew AFO, but not much more than that. That said, as far as the voice was concerned, Ishiyama, and his many predecessors and employees, were the worst scum of any of AFO's minions. The voice had gone to any lengths short of revealing themselves to see to it that Ishiyama's ilk had to be frequently replaced. Izuku understood the voice's sentiment from the moment he had been old enough to grasp what it was that Ishiyama actually did, wanting to take him to the police practically from his first mission as Amber. Luckily for Ishiyama, the chaos that had followed All for One's fall had prevented Izuku from removing him. Luckily for Izuku and everyone else, really, that same chaos had prevented Ishiyama from working especially effectively, between having to fight off other former pawns left and right, and having to find new buyers. But now, the chaos had died down. Ishiyama's current trafficking ring consisted, as far as they had been able to tell, of a dozen different people, and it had taken over 2 weeks to get a good grip on the schedules of each one. Normally, for a group this size, Izuku, and before him Aoi, would simply take out a couple of key pieces, and let the police mop up what they could. But in this case not only was the type of crime especially offensive, but the villains had conveniently provided the means to get every member of the group to the police in a single trip. Besides, there was a good chance that if enough got away, they could regroup. Remember, warned the voice, as Izuku was picking the lock of the first house, this guy has a quirk that improves reaction times. If he's awake, you'll need to be quick. Izuku entered the house on silent feet. The voice's warning turned out to be unneeded, as his first mark was all seep. Some quick work with a chemical-soaked rag, and he was down for the count. Izuku trusted the man, and dragged him through the house, to the adjoining garage. The reason this man was first was quite simple. He was typically the driver, so the ill-historied van was stored here. Taking the keys from their bowl on his way out of the house proper, Izuku moved to the innocuous transport, and tossed the ex-driver in the back. This was going to be a long night. Honestly, Izuku wasn't that confident in his ability to drive, but the half-dozen backseat drivers he brought along with him were quite capable drivers, and able to offer real-time adjustments, so there were no problems as he drove the van, and its, currently, lone passenger to their next destination. The next 6 houses were also emptied smoothly, their occupants living alone, and overconfident that their activities were only known amongst themselves. Ishiyama had apparently picked his compatriots with the usefulness of their quirks for his tasks in mind, and Izuku was thankful for the length of time he could now hold his breath, because the 4th trafficker, a woman who could release a gas that made anyone who breathed it immensely dizzy, started using her quirk the moment she woke up. The 8th house was the one which the voice thought would be the biggest problem. 2 traffickers, husband and wife, lived there. Izuku picked the lock quickly, as the voice listened for any sign that they had been noticed. When Izuku began to subdue the husband, whose quirk allowed him to hypnotize anyone who looked him in the eye, he kept an eye on the wife. Predictably, she woke swiftly, and almost immediately screamed. Well, that probably alerted one of the neighbors. "We need to hurry this along," said the voice urgently, as she pulled a phone from the pocket dimension her quirk created. Izuku wasn't sure who she intended to call, her boss, or the police, But he wasn't about to find out. The woman yelled again, as the burst of flames hit the hand holding the phone, forcing her to drop it, just before the husband finally went limp. The next item drawn from nowhere was, rather unexpectedly, a gun. Izuku's eyes widened, and he rushed forward, wrenching it to the side as she fired. The bullet still grazed his side as it made its way to the wall, but he managed to get her to drop it before she could get off another shot. The ensuing struggle lasted a couple of minutes, and earned Izuku a few nasty gashes on his arms, but eventually he managed to knock the wife out with a blow to the temple. Sheet, that was too close, thought Izuku, panting as he tied the pair up. Are you okay? We can stop if you aren't up for the last 3. No, I can keep going. Ishiyama could rebuild still. That okay, but we need to get out of here. And we won't have time for all 3 before the first few wake up. Ishiyama next then, the last 2 probably wouldn't get away without him. Izuku had no idea how Ishiyama had been alerted, but he had. When Izuku arrived at the compound where Ishiyama tended to sleep, as well as keep people before transport, the man was not only awake, but clearly preparing to leave. When Izuku saw him, he had a harried appearance, rushing through the building, clearly not long out of bed, hair mussed, suit wrinkled, various papers in one hand, and a briefcase in the other. When he saw Izuku, his eyes widened, then he dropped what he was holding and lashed out. Ishiyama's quirk was a pretty simple one. It just caused people within his visual range to lose their sense of where parts of their body were. Izuku found himself unable to tell where his legs were in relation to one another. Don't move your feet, and keep your hands in sight. He will expect you to fall when he closes in, warned the voice, watching the man and Izuku's hands carefully as they entered visual range. Sure enough, the business-suited man rushed in and threw a quick jab at Izuku in the hopes of making him try to take a step backwards. The path of his fist passed close enough to Izuku's arm, so he simply conjured a small, hot flame shield in its way, causing the man to yell and jerk it back as he developed a first-degree burn on his hand in an instant. Izuku knew that drawing this out was not in his favor. If he fell at any point, the monster would have ample time to get away before he could get up again. He threw his own punch, careful to both keep his hand in sight and not reach out too far, though it was impossible to tell how much he was leaning. At the same time, he made a stream of fire to curve around behind the trafficker at waist height, cutting off retreat. The man was clearly not used to anyone staying standing during a fight with him. He stepped in as the fire began to burn the back of his suit, right into the blow. His eyes widened as the air left him, and he threw a wild punch, which Izuku easily turned aside with his left hand, even unsteady as he was. Izuku turned the overreaching man, before bringing his right arm around the man's neck and grasping his left with it. At least, he assumed the rest of his arm was there. He couldn't see it for his head. The man's struggles quickly took them both to the floor, but eventually he went limp. Izuku sat there for a minute, until he felt sure about where his legs were, breathing heavily. Are you okay, kid? Why yeah, I just need a minute. Take your time, he's not going anywhere. The voice was watching. Honestly, that went without saying these days. There wasn't much for them to do other than watch, other than themselves. Their current charge was the only person they could talk to. Izuku was currently trying not to look as tired as he was. Judging from the looks Bakugakuin was sending him, it wasn't working. Honestly, we shouldn't let him go on such long missions on school nights. As much as it needed to be done, and as soon as possible, the voice was not happy about acceding to Izuku going out last night. He was not getting enough sleep. But the villains were where they couldn't hurt anyone, and their most recent victim had been delivered safely to the police, rather than unsafely wherever they intended to take him. They had no idea who wanted him or why, but whatever the reason, it most likely wasn't good, especially given that they had found him in cork cuffs. They were, or rather Izuku was, the voice wasn't sure it could be said to be anywhere, on a bus, heading for the site of today's rescue training, and the whole bus was abuzz with conversations, which the voice tried to make sense of. Midoriya, said Azui-chan, causing them to nudge Izuku back into paying attention. I always say what's on my mind. Why yeah, Azui-san? Call me Tsuyu. Your quirk. It's a lot like Endeavor's. The voice burst into hysterical laughter, as Izuku tried to stammer out a response, and Todoroki-kun finally looked to be paying attention. Ha! Oh man. Well, that's true enough, as far as she's seen. But we can't believe she said that in front of his son. Hold up, Azui, sure they both have fire quirks, but endeavors are a different color, and I've never seen him do that hovering flames thing. So they aren't that similar, said Kirishima-kun, mercifully cutting off Izuku's awkward stammering. I'm kind of jealous though, your fire is really flashy. My hardening is useful, but it's kind of boring, you know? Huh, wasn't expecting that. Poor self-esteem maybe? They said, but Izuku was already showering the redhead with praise unprompted. He was a good kid. No, it's really cool. It would be really useful as a pro. You could fight villains without much danger, or property damage with a quirk like that. My naval laser is the perfect combo of strong and flashy, said Aoyama-kun. Yeah, but it SCKS that you can't use it for long without causing your stomach to collapse, replied Mina. Well, that was blunt. She shouldn't talk about quirk downsides like. But if we want to talk about strong quirks, other than Mido-kun, it's got to be Bakugo and Todoroki, added Mina-chan. Has she seen Tokoyami's quirk? He has some understandable control issues, but Dark Shadow is crazy strong too. Yeah, but Tokoyami is more subtle about it than Kaken and Todoroki. Thought their charge. If the voice had had eyebrows during the day, it would have been raising them. Just Bakugo and Todoroki? Izuku's face heated slightly. But Bakugo is always angry, so he'll never be popular, said Azui Tsuchan. Huh? She wasn't kidding about talking her mind. I like her, said Yugo, and the rest of the voice followed. The long overdue ribbing of Bakugo-kun continued, alongside some loud yelling until Aizawa-kun announced that they had arrived. The building that was revealed when they stepped out of the bus was a huge dome. When they got inside, they were greeted by the marshmallow-like form of the space hero themselves. No. Aizawa-kun walked up to 13 and quietly asked, "Where's All Might? He's supposed to be here for this class." 13 held up a hand, fingers splayed. He got caught in some incidents on his commute and ran out of time. His ever-shortening hero time limit. Tiesuke, that man is the height of irrationality. Well, let's begin, groaned the tired man. All right, before we begin, I have a couple of things to say, or 3 or 4, said the peppy hero, before launching into a somber topic. As many of you know, my quirk Black Hole lets me SCK anything into a vortex and turn it to dust. I use this ability to clear up rubble, to help people. However, this power could easily be used to kill. The same is true of many of the quirks here. We know, stated Ishigu, Dai, and Yugo at the same time, the others following the sentiment. It's important that you remember that you could seriously injure someone if you make a mistake with your powers, but today you will all be learning how to use your quirks to help save lives. Your quirks emphatically do not exist to hurt others, the hero finished with a bow, to applause from the students. Just then the lights flickered, and there was an odd sound. No, the cessation of a sound they had been hearing since entering. The fountain had stopped. Izuku's gaze, and thus theirs, snapped toward the square, where there was a black spot, like someone had placed a drop of ink in midair, which rapidly began to expand into a large cloud of fog. Sheet, Kurogyri. What's he doing here? Said most of the voice. Yugo had begun to experience as much of a panic attack as someone without a body could the moment they spotted that dark spot. Aizawa-kun must have turned to look too at some point, because he yelled to the students as a flood of people began to emerge from the localized fog bank. Huddle up and don't move. 13. Protect the students. Izuku mirrored the voice's growing horror as one of All for One's most important former lieutenants showed up right in front of him without warning with a large group of accomplices. How did he even know there was a class here now? It must have been the media break-in. We need to get help. Has the exercise already started? Asked Kirishima, as the last few villains emerged from the fog, causing the voice to fill with white noise for a moment. Oh God! They brought a Nomu. Did Kurogyri find some sort of cash? Or is he back somehow? Whimpered the voice once it could speak again. Stay back, those are villains. Aizawa, as Kurojari began to speak. 13, and Eraserhead. According to the schedule, All Might is also supposed to be here. The voice relaxed slightly, recognizing the voice of the fog. It's still Shirakumo, All for One hasn't somehow survived and retrieved the warp gate quirk, said the voice, still watching everything that happened carefully. Another of the villains began to speak, the one covered in something gray? We went through all this trouble, and the symbol of peace isn't even here. Do you think he would come if we killed some of the kids? The alarms didn't go off, they must be jamming them somehow. Kaminari, try to contact the school with your quirk. 13, evacuate the students, ordered Aizawa, moving to confront the villains himself. Stop him. He couldn't even take on Kurojiri if he were alone, yelled the voice urgently. Sensei, you can't fight that many villains alone, your style is more reliant on ambushes. Izuku called. No hero is a one-trick pony, said Aizawa, jumping down the stairs anyway. He's going to get himself killed, started the voice, before Kurojiri disappeared. Behind us. When Izuku turned, Kurojiri had indeed appeared between the class and the exit. I'm afraid I can't allow you to leave. We are the League of Villains, and we have come here today to extinguish the symbol of peace, but he appears not to be here. Has the schedule been altered perchance? Regardless, my role is dash. He didn't get to finish the sentence before both Kirishima and Bakugo launched attacks futilely into the mist. That could have been quite perilous. Kurojiri said calmly, as he reformed, unharmed. Regardless, you will be scattered. We need to get in there, he still has a body, and he won't move if we grab it once he knows our quirk. Get back, said 13, as the mist suddenly expanded, engulfing the class. When the mist faded, Izuku had been warped to a point above a large body of water, the shipwreck zone. Not good, we can't use our quirk under there, he thought as he hit the surface. Get to the surface. At least you can use your quirk to an extent there, urged the voice, before Izuku spotted a villain with some sort of shark mutation swimming quickly towards him. Before Izuku could start to swim away, another form appeared in his field of view and kicked the villain away. Midoriya. Why would they send her here? This is the best place for her, wondered the voice as Tsuyu's tongue shot out to grab Izuku, and she swam with him toward the boat. And is she holding Shinso? Tsuyu quickly swam to the boat with both boys in tow, and deposited Izuku on deck, before climbing up with Shinso. Thanks, Tsuyu-san, said Izuku. They knew we would be here, and the layout of the building. This is bad. So what do we do? These guys said they wanted to kill All Might, asked Shinso, quickly moving his wet hair from his eyes. They don't know what we can do, said the voice. We have an advantage, they sent Tsuyu-san here, so they can't know our abilities. Right, Karo, they should have sent me to the conflagration zone, confirmed Tsuyu, thoughtful. Shinsu-kun, do you think your brainwashing could get this many villains? No, I need a response, I'd only be able to get some of them, answered the purple-haired boy. And I can't keep them here, they would swim under anything I made. Okay, Tsuyu, could you jump out of the circle with both of us? Yes, but they would just follow us, Karo. Don't worry, I'll cover us. Shota was beginning to panic. There were far too many villains here. Problem Child was right, he wasn't suited to this. Especially not with this many mutations in the mix. Worse, now he was beginning to hear fighting from the other zones. And the most dangerous-looking two hadn't even. There was a massive explosion from the shipwreck zone. Steam rising in a vast cloud over the water. The distraction it caused allowed him to take down a couple more of the villains, but he was slowing down. And he had no idea what had caused that explosion. One of the two at the back finally began to move, the one covered in what looked like hands. You're slowing down, Eraserhead, he said, moving in swiftly. You the boss? Shota asked, quirk trained on the man. He didn't know what he could do, and didn't want to have to find out. Handman deftly caught the piece of capture weapon Shota sent towards him, still advancing. 17 seconds, he said, entering striking range. Shota threw an elbow into the man's stomachy. The villain caught it. You make it hard to tell. But your hair falls when you drop your quirk, and you're doing so more often. Getting tired? Sheet, thought the hero, his burning eyes finally forcing him to blink. The sleeve of his costume fell away, and a sharp spike of pain shot through him as the skin on his elbow began to crumble. Shota swiftly reactivated his quirk and punched the man with his other arm before backing away. He tried to fight off the other villains as Handman spoke again. You really aren't suited for drawn-out fights against large groups like this. But you jumped in anyway. So cool. But I'm not the final boss. One instant the thing with the exposed brain was standing where it had been since the start. The next it was standing over Shota, arm raised to strike. When Izuku and the other two arrived out of the steam cloud he had made at the shore, Eraserhead was doing far better than the voice had anticipated. When the villain with "those were hands," they finally realized, feeling slightly ill, managed to catch Aizawa's elbow, the voice urged him not to get in the way, that the teacher could still handle it. Then the Nomu moved. Seeing his teacher, arm broken like a twig, monster suddenly crouching over him on the ground, Izuku was already moving before he thought about it. Kurogyari returned to the hand villain, who was hanging back momentarily, and said something that prompted him to start scratching furiously at his neck. It is fast and strong. We don't know what else it can do. Izuku, be careful, warned the voice, Rin coming to the fore, as Izuku entered active combat. Aizawa's other arm was broken, despite him using his quirk, before Izuku arrived. Nomu often had quirks that made them extremely resilient, so Izuku had formed a very fierce fire in each hand, as Eraserhead spotted him, eyes widening, what was likely in order to retreat forming on his lips. He grabbed the Nomu's arm with his flame-wreathed right hand. Contrary to his expectations, the arm didn't withstand the flame, charring almost immediately. The beast tore the arm off, and a new one grew in seconds. My Nomu has regeneration, kid, said the hand villain. As Izuku's eyes widened, the Nomu grabbed his right arm in its new hand and squeezed. Izuku screamed as the arm broke. It needs to tear them off. Izuku, yelled the voice. Izuku raised his left arm swiftly. He wreathed the arm that was holding him in flames from his right, and moved the left to destroy the other arm. The monster screamed and let go as its arms were charred into uselessness. Izuku was about to try to get his injured teacher away from the monster, when the hand villain screamed, My Nomu. It was strong enough to kill All Might. How could you beat it? You cheater! And rushed toward Izuku, hand outstretched. When the man approached, parts of the voice seemed to go into shock for some reason, and Izuku, remembering what this man could do, panicked, and sent a stream of fire to keep him away. Izuku, no, started the voice, before a dark portal opened between the fire and the man. Izuku suddenly felt pieces of his own fire, moving at speed towards him at head height to his left, and desperately tried, too late, to halt them. And then the world fell away. Shota hadn't been expecting the monster's attack, much faster than he could react to. He expected less one of his students rushing towards it to help him, while he uselessly tried to erase the monster's quirk, getting caught by it before he could order him back. Least of all had he been expecting what just happened. He had seen the panic in the kid's eyes when the portal opened in front of his fire, and so decided to erase his quirk, to get rid of the fire. Shota had seen a lot of reactions to having a quirk erased. From the minor, sometimes not even noticing, to the major perception quirk users tended to freak out to various extents, but this was by far the worst he had ever witnessed. The instant Shota's quirk took hold, the fire stopped, but the kid went limp, every muscle relaxing as he fell to the floor like a rag doll, unmoving. Shota couldn't even see if he was breathing. As the doors of the facility exploded inwards, he hurriedly undid his quirk, panicked. He can't be dead. He was lost. He didn't know where he was, or what was going on, or even who he was. He had no names for it at anything, no context, no frame of reference. Meaningless noise and shifting colors he could make no sense of assaulted him, and he had no idea how to make it stop. He could only wait and beg wordlessly, for he had no words, for it to abate. And suddenly he was Izuku again. The world snapped back into place. Every name, every memory pouring back into his head with such violence and suddenness that he immediately blacked out. For the first time since he had avenged his mentor, Toshinori could not bring himself to smile. As he entered the USJ, he found a cluster of frightened students supporting an injured 13, their suit all but destroyed at the back. Beyond them lay the plaza as it would likely appear in his nightmares. Dozens of villains littered the area. Most unconscious, Aizawa was desperately trying to stand from where he lay, beneath a behemoth, with an exposed brain and limply hanging arms, both of his own arms bent at unnatural angles. Following his gaze, he saw Midoriya, lying unmoving on the ground. This would not stand. One for all burned in him as he rushed down the stairs to the plaza, knocking the villains in his way to the ground before they could react. He took Midoriya, please let him be unconscious, Azui, and Shinso to the base of the stairs in a single trip, before carrying Aizawa, as carefully as he could at such speeds, in a second. Whatever it was, the monster, Toshinori had seen many different mutations from quirks, but never something like the exposed brain of this thing, made no move to stop him, and the villain with hands all over himself staggered back as he was struck when sprinting hero passed him to get to the furthest two. The hand villain began raving something, but Toshinori was more concerned with checking that young Midoriya was actually breathing, then telling the conscious students to get him and Aizawa to the entrance. Turning back, he made to take the hand villain down, but the dark-skinned monster finally moved. Toshinori's Carolina smash hit the thing cleanly, but it had no obvious effect. It didn't even step back. My Nomu has shock absorption, you'd have to scoop out its guts to hurt it. Gloated the villain, revealing information about his ally? Weapon? Without cause. Absorption, not canceling, so there should be a limit. Thought Toshinori as he threw another punch. The first thing Izuku heard after he regained consciousness was the voice. Don't. It yelled, before turning to a voice like it wanted to cry, which quickly turned to one of puzzlement. Oh, Izadash. Izuku? Am here. Happened? Asked Izuku, groggily, as relief suddenly flooded to voice. Izuku, you're okay. You threw some fire, but Kurogyri redirected it back. We don't know what happened after. Well, that explained why they sounded like they wanted to cry. If there had been a time gap right after that, they must have thought that he would be the youngest addition to the voice so far. Though it didn't explain why the voice had reacted as it had to the hand villain. Izuku tried to make sense of his last memories before waking up, but found it to be impossible. It was just senseless noise. He snapped his eyes open and relaxed when he saw that they were not still in the... Looking around, he saw Aizawa, both arms in casts, sleeping in a chair beside his bed. Or not sleeping, since he looked up the moment Izuku tried to sit up. Stay still, problem child. How are you feeling? He asked, sounding concerned. Fine, I think. Is everyone okay? What happened? Replied Izuku. Everyone else was fine. We were the only two injured, unless you count Kaminari overusing his quirk. All Might showed up just after you passed out. The thing that got us wasn't much of a fight with its arms out of commission. Soothed the teacher, adding. Only two of them got away. Izuku relaxed back onto the bed. Everyone was fine. Everything turned out okay. You broke your arm, and then we don't even know what happened. Pointed out the voice, gently chiding. What happened after that portal opened? Asked Izuku, frowning. I erased your quirk, and you collapsed. Answered the tired man, sounding guilty. Do you have any idea why you might have reacted like that? Sheet, we need to think of a dual quirk? Something about memory, said.